Yeah. It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Sweep you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock this. Let's get it started. It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Sweep you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock this. Let's get it started. Yeah, get your boots ready. We're about to go on a trip where we wrestle, nobody settling or calling it quits. You're here for the grit, betcha this stuff is amazing. You're stumbling, welcome to the bump in the apron. Step into it, the hardest part of the ring. Here to bring fun, yeah, and this art he's king. It's the best thing, making sure you don't tap out. Don't go soft with the hardest podcast out. And it's not just another one, it's clear. Off the rest, in this content, none contest. Take the nonsense off the steps. You know it's nothing but pure gems when it's coming off the chest. Get it? Now it's time to sit and relax. Get your mind blown away, ain't no skipping this track. Have you paying more attention, no listening gap. Get everything I ever wanted, no giving it back. Yeah.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Kyle, also known as the hardest part of the ring. Welcome to the Apron Bump Podcast, and I don't know. I didn't really have a plan to, sometimes you just gotta make a noise. Where are we at here? Progress Chapter 18, titled, The Show We Can't Call Progresselmania for Legal Reasons, which is funny, you know, because WrestleMania, which is fun, because, this show occurs on WrestleMania weekend, or at least close to it, maybe a week before or so, from 2015. So big marquee show for Progress. This show is their 3rd anniversary, which, by golly, how time has flown, huh? Started from the very beginning of Progress. Now we're already 3 years in. How about that, folks? It's a very monumental show for Progress. But you wouldn't really think that if you just looked at the card, because the card is it's an interesting card, because it's very, and we talk about this. We talk about a lot in the episode itself, so I'll keep this short. But the show's very top heavy, because it's headlined by a 6-man elimination match for the Progress Championship. So most of the big stars are in that one match. So what that leaves is a whole rest of a card full of so we got a lot of debuts in the show. We got a lot of PROJO graduates. We got a brutal no disqualification match between Mark Haskins and Rampage Brown, kind of following up their match from the last chapter. We get a banger of a match between the team of Chuck Mambo and Pastor William Ever, otherwise known as Sweet Jesus. So we got Sweet Jesus versus the Sumerian Death Squad, who, if you're not aware, is the team of a debuting Michael Dante and Tommy End. Big team in, at least I've watched him a lot in WXW. Not a lot. I've watched him a little bit in WXW in Germany. So they're bringing their brand of violence to London here. Might have been the match of the night, honestly, in my opinion. So you got those couple matches, those marquee spots, but the rest of the show is filled with just weirdness, honestly. I mean, we get some debuts, we get some open challenges, we get a tag team title match, which is it's something. We got a lot to say about it, but I don't want to steal the spotlight from the episode itself, but very interesting show, to say the least. If you're just stumbling upon this, maybe for the first time, you're like, hey, I enjoy Progress Wrestling. Or maybe you're like, hey, I'm not very familiar with Progress Wrestling. I sure would like to begin this journey from the beginning. Well, I got you. Go to apronbump.com, go to the episodes tab and select Progress Wrestling, and that'll bring you to all of my reviews. And I've done every chapter from chapter 1 up to now, chapter 18. So go check that out. Binge away. It's been a journey. It's been a fun one so far. So check that out if you haven't already. And also check out at some point my guests for this episode, Jeremy and Adam from the Wrestling at Random podcast. You can follow them on Twitter at Wrestle at Random. And you can listen to them wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube as well. All of their info will be in the description below, as always. But yes, that is the Wrestling at Random podcast. A really fun show because, you know, if you listen to me, you know that I go in chronological order across several different timelines. But these guys, they have this huge, robust randomizer that they've coded to basically pull in wrestling from all over the internet that's 10 years or greater in age. And they just throw it in a randomizer, and every week they just pick one at random as per their show title. And they just, whatever show the randomizer tells them, they review. And that's literally, it could be a pay-per-view. It can be just a who gives a fuck episode of Velocity or primetime wrestling from the 80s. Like, they cover a lot of stuff, a wide variety of stuff. Japanese wrestling, they do a lot. And there's some just entertaining guys over there. So go check them out. Wrestling at Random. And, it's funny, the past few Progress episodes that I've done, I've had like experts in Progress Wrestling. Tea and Tights, Wrestling Should Be Fun, guys that are, local Europeans and have seen these guys live and are very familiar with the entire catalog of Progress and are even up to date up till now. And of course, had RJ Singh on a few episodes ago, who clearly is very familiar with Progress as he wrestled for them. And so the past couple episodes, I feel like I've been learning from my guests, but in this case, Jeremy and Adam, they're hopping in cold. They have never seen Progress before, other than maybe a few matches here or there. It's not a part of their randomizer yet because it's still a little too recent. But it was fun getting their first impressions from these guys and kind of putting me in the teacher role, so to speak. At least like catching them up on storylines and the context of certain things. So like I said, it's just fun to see somebody's like initial reaction to like the tag team titles and how it's a fucking split shield and the Jimmy Havoc eating somebody's heart, like all that stuff that to us, right? People have been, to me, I've been watching it. And if you've been watching it, or if you've at least been listening to me talk about it, you're familiar with this kind of stuff, but Jeremy and Adam were not. So, but we had a fun time talking about it. And, yeah, let's get into it. I've rambled enough. Progress Chapter 18 with myself and Jeremy and Adam from the Wrestling at Random podcast. But yeah, guys, once again, thank you guys for making the time to come on here. It's a question. Have either of you watched any Progress Wrestling before this show?
So going into this show, I have seen just the Progress that WWE NXT UK showed me. So just that, that was kind of my introduction, was, that UK tournament and getting introduced to those guys. So most of my British wrestling is actually Rev Pro related, because we watch a lot of New Japan stuff.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say that's largely the same with me. I'd say I've probably seen a little bit more like matches here or there, but never really watched a full show. I mean, the UK scene, the Brit Rest scene from kind of the height before, they got involved with WWE, and Pete Dunne got mad at everyone because he said that was somehow going to raise the rising tide was going to lift all boats, and we all know how that worked out. I had not seen really a ton full show wise. So yeah, I mean, like Jeremy said, the majority of what I've seen is Rev Pro, just because outside of the show I do with Jeremy with Wrestling at Random, I'm talking Japan all the time. And so that's, that's the one that I pay attention to the most. But I'm familiar with a good number of the guys that, that were on the show. It's always a little jarring, and we'll talk about it on the show, I'm sure, but it's always a little jarring if you're not watching a lot of British wrestling. And then you're like, oh yeah, Brit Rest crowds are different.
We will get into that. Yes, we've got
absolutely.
thoughts. Yeah,
we could do a whole podcast on just the different chants that
and just the different chants. It's just like the different. Like I'm not making a value judgment on it, but it's just so weird because. And we get that a lot here, live shows, but even more so there, where people are there to amuse themselves and have a communal good time. And the fact that there's a square thing in the middle of the building that people are bouncing off of is almost inconsequential.
Right. Yeah. Dude, it was, I so badly want to go to London and go to one of these shows someday. It seems like a good time. These lads over here, they're having a good time.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
It's a trip for sure. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, if nothing else, it would beat, some of the dead crowds for independent shows that I've been to. I mean, talk about different podcasts we could do. I mean, I remember going to an IWA Mid-South show in 2005 that had CM Punk versus Nigel McGuinness in the middle of basically in a National Guard armory in the middle of a cornfield, and there were 24 people there. So you can imagine the atmosphere or lack thereof. I'd take this atmosphere over that.
Yeah, this is completely unrelated. But last night I actually watched an ECW show, and the main event was it was New Jack and Mustafa the Gangsters versus Public Enemy. It was an awful match, terrible match, but the crowd the crowd loved it, so I enjoyed myself watching it. Like that shows the value of a crowd. So that's why I like these early Progress shows always had hot crowds. So
well, I mean, and that's so much of what ECW was too. I mean, even at the live shows, I mean, obviously I'm not breaking any ground when I say it that ECW doesn't necessarily always rewatch the best compared to other stuff, but most of the time the crowds are there, the crowds are with it, and that carries a lot of it.
So how did you start down the path of watching all these early Progress shows?
Yeah, we're both wondering that.
Yeah. So so Progress is just one of those companies I always heard about, and I had seen a few matches here and there. And I guess first of all, I was really drawn to NXT UK from the first tournament they did. Yep. I thought I didn't even know like really anybody in that first tournament, but I was such a fun watch. And then the brand started, and I enjoyed that. They had the second tournament. So I was like, man, maybe I just like British wrestling, European wrestling. Yeah. So, and Progress is one of those big name companies that there's also the Rev Pros, your other ones, WXW in Germany, which I watch a little bit of. But also, you know what, Progress, they list them in chapters. It seems like an easy thing to just watch in a linear fashion, and might as well add it to content for my podcast. So, yeah, and it's really because you guys are coming in here kind of randomly, chapter 18. Yeah. So maybe some of the storylines are kind of lost on you, which honestly, there's chapter 18 actually had a lot of debuts, so it actually wasn't a bad thing. So a lot of people maybe you're seeing for the first time. I'm also seeing for the first time.
Okay.
There's one guy in particular that I really want to shit on later this episode, but
I'll be interested to hear which one, because there's a few on my end.
Adam has he was texting me during the show. He's like, our show, we fire up the randomizer. We dump all the content of the internet into the randomizer. We fire it up. We don't get to pick. It picks for us. But you picked this show for us.
Hey.
So I said, there's some good stuff on there. No,
it's also a weird show, too, because so many of the top guys are in the six-way, and so anytime you have, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying this is like that, but Jeremy, think back to the December to Dismember show we did not that long ago, where you had those six guys in the Elimination Chamber, and then you were left with the likes of
depth.
Yeah, no depth at all. So I'm not saying this is quite like that, but I feel like anytime when you have that big of a multi-man main event, you're going to end up with some weird stuff on the rest of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this show had a few Sylvester Turkais in it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a few Sylvester Turkais and just a few. I don't know. We'll get into it. As I always tell Jeremy, I don't want to do the podcast before the podcast too much.
Hey, no, you guys run with it. It makes my job easier. But so good to know. So you guys are kind of coming in fresh here.
Yeah.
Familiar with NXT UK at least a little bit, I suppose, right?
Yep. And just so you know, I'm going off camera just because my internet is really not dependable. And every couple of weeks we try to do hey, let's try doing a test of both of us on camera. and then on my end it just dies and it's a disaster. And so
don't lie to you. You're just, you know how much more attractive you are than both of us, and you don't want to outshine us.
That's exactly what it is. No, I'm afraid to be number
very
3.
gracious.
No, trust me. We would have been live streaming our podcast recording and introducing chats and all kinds of stuff to the show if his internet was able to handle
and
it.
it's not for a lot. I mean, like, I've got ridiculous like high-speed internet. It's just, I think it's just in the apartment complex I'm in, there's just too much stuff going on that's just like it's just killing the dependability of it at that high speed.
Someone's mining Bitcoin upstairs.
Yeah given the age range of people who are listening in here, I fully believe that. So hopefully by the summertime, if I end up in a new apartment, end up in a different place, it'll be a little different situation. But yeah, kind of stuck with it as it is right now. And I've got, not only does Jeremy want to do it, but I've got pressure coming on me from the Observer. They want my other podcast to be video as well, and I'm like, sorry guys, like there's nothing I can do. So we'll get there eventually.
We're gonna launch a Patreon tier to get Adam better internet somehow.
Well, it's not to get me better internet, because I've got like
you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get me a better apartment, because I've got I really can't go much higher. But
listeners,
there you go.
We'll start a GoFundMe, Ko-fi coffee. What is that little thing? One of those. We'll start it, but as long as I have your velvety voice in my ears, that's all I need.
Perfect.
There you go.
But yeah, you said it, and that's the exact thought that I had when I first saw this card. And it's main evented by a six-man title match for the Progress Championship. You have Jimmy Havoc, the champion, defending against Marty Scurll, Dave Mastiff, Noam Dar, Paul Robinson, and Will Ospreay. Now, four of those guys have had individual title matches in the previous chapters where Jimmy Havoc, slides by in some way or fashion. Paul Robinson, as you guys probably figured out, is in a faction with Jimmy Havoc. So he's basically there to kind of help Havoc defend the title. But you mentioned that like all their stars are in this one match. So the rest of the card is it's a little thin, but there is some good stuff amongst it. There's no real... Well, maybe you guys will disagree, but there's no real bad matches except for one, actually. Now that I just think about it, but we'll get to it. There's a reason though, and I'll bring it up.
I wouldn't say there's anything that's 100% terrible, other than the one thing that I'm sure you're going to bring up. But it is, to me, it's a bit noteworthy, and it's also indicative of the style and the time period on the Indies, whether it be here in the U.S. or in the U.K. How stylistically similar a lot of the wrestlers are, and it's something that Jeremy and I talk about a lot when we go to shows together, how when you've got, say, 15 guys on a show that are all doing the step up gamangiri into the springboard or whatever and all that sort of stuff, which is great. But when you've got 2 of them that can do it really, really, really well, and then the other 13 that try to do it but don't do it as crisply, it almost kind of detracts from then the 2 guys that do it really well, because you've seen it over and over on the show. So there's like Dave Mastiff. I was thrilled when I saw that dude on this show, and I saw him he was doing this match. I'm like, thank you, somebody different.
Yes.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely, that's modern wrestling in a nutshell, kind of. You get a lot of moonsaults and Canadian destroyers and enziguris, and kind of blend together eventually, like you said. But
it feels like everybody's kind of, at a certain point, everybody started training to be the same wrestler. And there's a great quote or a great interview that Minoru Suzuki did last year, where he talked about how Jon Moxley was terrible at everything, and that's what makes him a great wrestler. Basically, the idea that the things that you aren't great at, the things that you aren't perfect at, let's say you don't run the ropes perfectly, or you don't move exactly like everybody else, or the kick you throw looks a little bit different. Those things that maybe in a training school they'd say, well, that's off, you got to drill that. In the end, those are the things that actually make you look like a little bit different wrestler and make you stand out.
Yeah, there's definitely value to being a little rough around the edges. I think.
Yeah, we love when the roughness adds to the struggle, and then it makes it just a different. Less polished is sometimes an advantage to a match, as you can see the struggle. It adds a different dimension, a different layer to it. And to be clear, Adam and I review classic pro wrestling shows on our podcast. So we review a lot of old stuff and stuff that's at least 10 years old. So, but to be clear, we do watch a ton of modern pro wrestling. We from all over the world,
hours and hours and hours a week.
Yes,
and also to be clear, so people don't think I'm like a Jim Cornette type. I love modern wrestling.
Right. That's what I want to make sure that
I watch
these kids these days
tens of hours a week for wrestling of modern wrestling for the Japanese wrestling podcast that I do, the Big Audio Nightmare, on top of going to indie shows all the time. So like I appreciate the modern style.
We went to AEW on last Wednesday in Chicago.
Yeah.
So we we battled a snowstorm to get there.
Did we ever? So yeah, the modern style isn't something that's a put off necessarily, but it's interesting when you're watching a full show like this, that the guys that if you were just to put them on a random show, like Dave Mastiff wouldn't necessarily stand out. But when you put him on a show with, you know, a Will Ospreay and a Flash Morgan Webster who are great at the high flying style, and then sort of a cascading list of guys who aren't as good, Dave Mastiff to me stands out as the guy that was the most noticeable guy in the entire card.
Are you trying to tell me that Bubblegum isn't good?
Oh, he is not good.
I
can confirm.
Don't understand. And
I don't want to blow our load on that. I want us to edge to that match. It's towards the end.
Yes. What a strange character and wrestling style match together. We will get to it.
Let's put it this way. When I saw him on the card, I was like, man, I've never heard of this guy. I figured out why.
Yeah. No, I try not to usually go on the old Wikipedia. I usually hit the cage match, but I had to go full Wikipedia to figure out what the deal was with this dude, because I was shocked that I had no idea who he was.
Yeah. Well, we figured it out. We figured out why.
Yes.
Didn't make it. Just close.
Yeah, maybe one day. Maybe one. Is he still alive? You said you did a Wikipedia search.
He is, and that's the one thing I don't know how much you have or haven't touched on fully on the progress side in terms of the whole speaking out movement. And like, to me, that was the other thing with this show. When I saw progress and then I looked at the card, I'm like, oh wow, it's progress from 2015. And there's a fairly high percentage of guys from here that have been fairly credibly implicated in some not too great things. And he, from what I could tell, he's one of those guys that was,
that makes sense.
Had gotten himself mixed up in that whole, had done some terrible things. I don't want to equivocate and say got himself mixed up. He's
a naughty boy. We'll just say that.
Yeah. And that's a whole separate podcast. We could dive into all of the speaking out stuff. If you aren't aware of that, there's plenty of people more talented than us that have covered that in depth. And you should definitely read it. And you should definitely see what happened and keep a lookout on what people are doing to try to make the wrestling scene, especially the British wrestling scene, a better place.
And you've got some people who are really trying to make it a better scene, and then you've got some reputation laundering going on. And so it is interesting though, because you see some very big stars on this show, some guys that were, you know, trending to go a certain direction, and then when things came out about what they did, you know, they've dropped off the map or main event in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that is different avenues people take to handle that.
But so we are definitely not minimizing or ignoring it, but we are going to do our best to separate the art from the artist in this review specifically.
Yeah, we're going to review the show is the idea.
We can compartmentalize the performers separate from the people
for this review.
If we've been able to do it with Chris Benoit, Jeremy,
I swear to you, I was literally about to say that.
Yeah, it shows up all the time on the randomizer.
That first episode that we did about that had a Benoit match, which was the Royal Rumble 2003. We talked a lot about it on there, and like we always say on the podcast, when we go into talking about a Chris Benoit match, we're not ignoring it. Go back and listen to that episode. We've talked through it as much as we can, and just know that all the feelings we had when we talked about that a couple years ago, we still have them now. And it's the same way with this.
It's one of those things where it's like, it can't be unsaid. Like, everybody has the same kind of feeling. Nobody's like, Chris Benoit, good for you. Like, everybody's like kind of on the same boat. So we can kind of.
I will say, though, we did have someone decide to stop listening to the podcast.
We got a 1-star review because we gave a disclaimer about it. Yeah,
leave a nasty review because we talked about Chris Benoit and what he did and how terrible it was and how conflicted it made us feel about watching his matches, someone stopped listening to the podcast
1 star
for that. So
yes, but we powered on. We soldiered on without him, and we've been able to produce 3 seasons of
you
content.
Sure? You sure you guys are gonna be able to make it without that fella?
We did.
Somehow the show continued without the Chris Benoit moralists on board. So we survived, thankfully, and we're here with you.
Well, hopefully you guys survive that. Hopefully you don't bring your 1-star guy to my podcast.
No.
So I think this might be a bad idea.
We're hoping that we bring some of your passionate listeners over to give our podcast.
You don't want that. There's a bunch of animals that listen to me. But speaking of animals, let's talk about this intro here. So it's chapter 18. It's the 3rd anniversary of Progress, which is pretty significant. And one thing about this show, which you guys hadn't seen other shows, so you wouldn't know that this was different. Typically, these shows, they don't show any entrances. They don't show, like, the intro. When Jim Smallman, who's the owner, ring announcer guy, they don't show any of that in the beginning. They just cut right to the matches, and then the match will end, and then it'll be, like, a graphic on screen that'll cut right to, like, right before the match starts.
For each match, so they don't show any entrances at all, you're saying?
Pretty much no. Maybe a few here and there if, like, something happens during the entrance, but in general, they don't show really any entrances. So I don't know if that's something they just do going forward, or if that was a special thing for the anniversary, or if they just didn't catch it this time. Who knows? Because it's a lot of the music's. I don't know what the copyright deal is with the music.
There's a lot of Metallica, and I said I don't think Lars Ulrich signed off on the usage of this much Metallica.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. At the open, I was a little bit disappointed. I heard that music, and I thought, oh man, Nick Gage in Progress, but sadly not the case.
Yeah.
Anytime a show opens with "For Whom the Bell Tolls," I'm in. I know we're going to be off to a good start.
Yeah, especially when a dog comes out. Yeah. So we got Jim Smallman. It's just like the banter in the beginning. He's kind of warming up the crowd, I guess, a little bit, going over the rules, which there's only one rule, and that's don't be a dick, apparently. And then as Jim is talking, music interrupts him, and a dog mascot comes out, like kind of a Clifford the big red dog kind of deal, maybe a little more badass version of Clifford.
I assumed it was Cody Rhodes in the mascot, having experienced end stage Bullet Club Ring of Honor.
Oh, yes. That would have made sense. But it was not. It was the Download Dog, who apparently is a thing.
The mascot of the Download Festival.
Yes, of course. We all know this, right?
I know the Download Festival. I was aware of that because I know they've done wrestling there before. And
the marketing of the Download Dog, apparently.
The Download Dog, I missed that. I haven't seen that on many.
It hasn't reached over the pond yet.
No.
But maybe we'll start it here. But yeah, the Download Dog is here to basically give Jim Smallman a note announcing that Progress will be a part of the Download Festival. Coming up here, I don't know what exactly, maybe a few months after the show, for several days. So that's a big deal, big festival. Progress still fairly new. I mean, they're 3 years in, but they're only 18 shows in, really. So they're still fairly new. So it's a big deal for Progress at this point. So the dog's out there, everybody's having fun. Oh man, Progress going to Download, and then out comes Jimmy Havoc, the Progress champion. I should say, on that note that the dog gave to Smallman, one of the amendments was Jimmy Havoc is banned from the festival. Because
seems like a good idea.
Great idea.
Really.
Yeah, that's
wrestling, not wrestling. I'd say if you're holding the Download Festival, Jimmy Havoc can be outside the festival.
I don't know if we want to talk about Jimmy Havoc now or later, but
let's get it out of the way now. I'm just going to jump in and say, how is this man the world champion of this company with all these other great wrestlers? And they said at one point that he'd been the world champion for 14 months.
Yep. Do you want me to tell you how he won the title? Maybe that'll shed some light.
First, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say I've seen Jimmy Havoc in a lot of places. He in AEW and in other promotions, and I've never
various rocks and dark alleys.
Yeah, I never got it. I never got like the popularity. Like he seemed to have a cult following, but like and people dug it, but I don't the character and the wrestler never really did anything for me.
He always came off to me like a Kirkland's British Raven.
Okay, yeah, I could. Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's just and I don't know if it's I don't know what it is, but it never clicked with me. I never got it. I never got the push. But like here, he seemed to be pretty got a lot of reactions from the crowd for sure.
Yeah. I think Jimmy Havoc, he plays the slime ball heel really well, especially when you factor in he has a faction surrounding him that helps him win a lot of matches, all the hullabaloo surrounding it. And Jimmy Havoc came into Progress as a major babyface. Like there was like an internet campaign to get him on the shows.
Oh, wow.
He came on some of the shows. The crowd was really behind him. And then he had a brutal heel turn. I think it was chapter 9. Where he attacked Jim Smallman and a couple other wrestlers and just shit all over the fans in the British way they do. So it was really vulgar and violent. And that was just a really jarring heel turn. And I think that kind of momentum has carried itself forward. And he's built that over time, adding people to his faction and getting out all these title matches in different ways. And the way he won the title initially, so Mark Andrews was the champion. He basically Mark Andrews won a tournament to where he could challenge the champion at any time he wanted. So he challenged the champion, who at the time was Rampage Brown. He challenged him right after he won the tournament, caught Rampage off guard. They had a little match, and Mark Andrews rolled him up for a quick victory. So Mark Andrews was champion. And now comes Jimmy Havoc, who beats on Mark Andrews. At the time, the title was a staff, which that's a whole other thing. But the title was a big...
with the weird stuff with the titles on this show. Like, we'll get to the tag title match later. Like, I thought it was like the Faceless' gimmick, but instead that's the championship.
No, that's the championship.
Some shield that looks like it's from a stage show at Universal Studios.
Yeah.
I'm glad they have a belt for the world title.
Yes.
It's pretty new at this point, because initially it was a staff and it had an eagle on top of it, which is the Progress logo. But it was this gargantuan thing that everybody had to carry around. It was ridiculous.
Taking that through the airport.
Yeah. Yeah. But it makes a good weapon, apparently. So he beat up Mark Andrews with it.
No one tell Gato and Dick Togo will have a staff championship in New Japan, and that'll be the House of Torture's championship matches.
Is that not a thing? You could have told me that's a real thing. I would have believed you.
Yeah. At this point, I'm shocked we haven't glued two of Yoshihashi's bow staffs together and made it the House of Torture TV championship.
It's too close to be funny.
Yeah.
Cuts too
it's not
deep
enough of an exaggeration. Yeah. But Jimmy Havoc, he threatened to light Mark Andrews on fire if he didn't get a title shot right now. So he was awarded one because they didn't want a man to die via fire. So they gave him a title match, and Jimmy Havoc just pinned him and won the title because he basically just picked the bones, and now he's been champion for, I think it was 14 months, you said?
Wow.
I think
it's weird because they say 14 months, but then they also say it's his 3rd anniversary of being the champion. And I feel like I'm better than Brian Alvarez at math, but still, that doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, there's something wrong there. But keep in mind, they only do shows every other month. So
yeah,
he's probably has I don't know, 6 defenses maybe.
Yeah. So he sends 2 dudes to the ring. They beat up this mascot, and then the show is finally going to start. We're 15 minutes in. A lot of Smallman's intro here. I had a
lot of banter.
I had a lot of this meeting could have been an email vibe from the start. And
I'll tell you what I had flashbacks to is going to IWA Mid-South shows and Ian Rotten coming out and talking for 45 minutes about every grievance and yelling at the people who were at the show because we were somehow the problem that there weren't more people at the show. This wasn't quite that. But it was still lengthy. My takeaway from this first 15 minutes was that swearing definitely allowed on both over the house mic and the commentary. There's no tip jar. There's no swear jar there. It's all good.
I've got Jim Smallman commentary thoughts later. We'll get to those.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
Wait, so was Jim Smallman on play-by-play? Because the guy said he was Jimmy Barnett. Is that what he called himself on commentary?
Yeah, it's like when Gabe Sapolsky was commentary for ROH in the early days, and he went by Chris Lovey.
Yes. Weren't there two? It's Chris Loving that I think he used a different name too. Like at the very beginning, I think he was two.
Well, no matter what name he used, it was awful. So.
Yes, very recognizable. And not
But yeah, so the show starts out with a little animal brutality to kick off the show. So really starting off your experience well here.
It would be a good time to have "This is progress" chanted. Then that always amused me. Like you would have like the most regressive, offensive things happen on the show, and then the crowd would chant "This is progress." And my brain
just thinking of your context, like, oh man, I got to watch a show with a bunch of rapists and pedophiles. Well, at least there's no animal brutality. Oh god damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just
oh, for Pete's sake,
scratch them all off the list, I guess, before we get to the actual matches.
Hey, might as well just get all out of the way. But yeah, opening match here, we got Zach Gibson versus Adamo O'Connor, aka Killian Dane.
Killian Dane, and then Zach Gibson would go on to be one of the grizzled young vets in NXT as well. So these are two guys I'm familiar with from NXT television.
Jeremy, didn't we see, correct me if I'm wrong, did we see Killian Dane at that takeover show at Barclays that we were at? Was he on that show? I feel like he was. I
feel like he was.
Sanity Days.
Yeah, that would have been that would have been the Mania, the New York Mania. So,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that he was. I think that was probably the only time either of us have seen him live.
Mm-hmm. Was that when they won the tag titles?
Yes, that is it. Yep.
Yeah, so a couple tag team aficionados here in the opening match here. So we got Zach Gibson coming out. Lots of 2-1 chants, which apparently is a soccer reference. I guess the team that the people there like lost a soccer game match show. So yeah, obviously Liverpool, Zach Gibson. People in London do not like Liverpool, to say the least. Lots of
I did get from this. That certainly came out. Jimmy Barnett / Jim Smallman says that there's something about Scouser culture that is an issue here. And then at one point early in this match, the crowd starts singing "Where's My Car Stereo?" And this is when I realized, oh yes, I am watching a Brit Rest show, and this is not going to be. I'm gonna have to recalibrate my brain for the crowd reactions here, or just be able to accept that I'm not gonna know what these human beings are talking about.
Yeah, you kind of just gotta sit back sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm never gonna understand what that is. They
Yes.
make references to TV shows over there. It's like, oh, okay, is it The Office, Ricky Gervais, something? Who knows?
Well, they start out all together, and by the end of this show, you can see the drunkenness take over, and then it's just like pockets of their own stuff going on. But yeah, early it's everyone together trying to have a good sing along, and then by the end, it's a mess.
Oh, at first it's like impressive how synced they are. It's like they must have had practice before this, and at the end it's just like villain. Damo versus Zach Gibson. It's a fun opener. You have Damo starting off hot with a drop kick. That big hairy bastard, just coming out like a cannon. They fight outside. Someone gets thrown into the ringside chairs, which I'm always a sucker for that kind of spot. I believe it's Zach Gibson. He gets drop kicked into all the chairs.
He's drop kicked and ends up 3 rows deep into the chairs. Just completely wipes out. I don't know if this is a common spot here, but it was for this show. It was. You would see as soon as people went out to the floor, the front row would scatter. Stan Hansen was coming out at an All Japan show in the 80s. Like people scattered. Yeah,
they knew what to do for sure. And I guess when you've got Big Damo coming in at a kayfabe 320 pounds from Jimmy Barnett, which cracked me up. It made me think of all those shows that we watched, Jeremy, where it's wrestling from the 80s, and a guy is probably like legit weighing in at 215, and Girl Monsoon says he's like 305.
That's right.
Like Damo's big, but I don't know that he was 320.
He looks dense though. He looks like a dense boy.
Oh, for sure.
He does. And I guess they could sort of be doing weight by scale. And when I say by scale, I guess I'm meaning that it's relative weight. And if you look at the fact that most of the guys in this show are well under 200 pounds, comparatively speaking, Damo might be close to 400 pounds.
I don't ever want to hear British weight not referred to in stone, first of all.
Yes.
So yeah, they're fighting on the outside a little bit. At some point, Damo charges Gibson, but Gibson gets out of the way, and Damo goes arm first into the ring post. And that sets up a lot of arm work inside the ring by Zach Gibson, because his finisher is the Shankly Gates, which is an arm-based submission. So he's doing various submissions and moves to target the arm.
Just going back to that post spot, it cracked me up because it's one of those things that it's always amusing to me about wrestling physics, is that when you start doing a move, when you start running toward the post, the animation must finish. And what I mean by that is he's running towards the post, his opponent moves, and yet he continues running toward the post until that video game animation is over. It's one of those things that, as a wrestling fan, you almost don't notice it. But if you were to show it to a non-wrestling fan, they'd be like, why did that man continue running headfirst into that steel object?
Us wrestling fans, we accept it. It's totally fine.
Look, Damo is 478 pounds. When you have that kind of weight behind you, you can't just stop. Okay, it's like a train.
That is accurate. But how many stone is that? That's what I mean.
In the ring, when Damo starts throwing these avalanches in the corner and takes over, this is some good offense here. There's a lot of fire, a lot of good momentum, and this is Damo's Progress debut. So this is a good showing for Damo here on offense.
Well, it's also noticeable, and we'll get to it with one guy in particular later on the show, and I don't think it's just revisionist history. Like, when you look at the show, you can very clearly see that the guys who are going to be stars in a couple of years, they stand out on this show so much more than the bubblegums of the world. And Damo here, the future Killian Dane, definitely fits that bill.
Yeah, no, his look here is great, by the way, because it was very minimalist. It was like very old school British, just trunks. It almost looked like just underwear he was wearing with boots.
It's because the no knee pads always do that.
Yes, that's what it was. Because eventually in NXT, they'd had like a shirt and jeans. It almost made him look small when he had all that on. But he looked like a gargantuan here, a big, hairy gargantuan. But yeah, my favorite spot probably of the whole match is when Gibson, I believe he was on his stomach, Damo gets on his back and he like surfs on him, and then he does a senton from that surf. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. But so Gibson, he goes for a lung blower off the second rope, but Damo counters into a powerbomb, spinebuster kind of deal, but kicks out at 2. Then Damo goes for a splash in the corner, but Gibson gets out of the way and then is able to hit that lung blower, followed by a really impressive like spinning brainbuster, which the strength on this guy to pick up this 783 pounder or whatever I said earlier.
He invented the Blade Buster, Jay White's future setup move.
God, how many moves does Jay White have? I feel like every move he does has a name for it.
That's
crazy.
Everything does have a wacky name for it. That is absolutely true.
The Sheath Slam.
Oh,
try Kiwi Crusher.
Yeah, try reviewing an ECW show from the late '90s. And,
God, Joey Styles.
Try catching up with you want to talk about everything's got a name, like
Oh God. I mean, I'm still in '95 ECW, so the only moves people are doing are stabbing with glass and kendo stick shots, so there's not a lot of names for moves yet.
Well, Gibson here pulls out a fork to do some stabbing out of his boot.
Man, that's a segue. This guy's a host. This guy's a podcast host.
The best part about it, though, is that it's the decoy fork.
The decoy fork, you're right.
He had half a whole silverware set in his boots.
Yeah, I was disappointed that he didn't have like the regular fork and then the salad fork.
Are we sure that he did? Did we get a good look at it?
If this had been in HD, we may have been able to make that analysis.
Yeah, it's a shame. But yeah, I'm watching this match. It's like, it's a fun little opener. And it just escalates quickly. Like this guy, he pulls out a fork. Zach Gibson does. The ref takes it, like you said, the decoy fork, only for Gibson to pull out a second fork out of his boot to stab Damo in the face with said fork. And then Gibson follows it up with a penalty kick, and that gives Zach Gibson the win. So Gibson looks like a savage coming out of this, gets the win, and Damo looks good coming out of it as well. So I enjoyed it for what it was.
Totally fine opener. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally fine opener, except for, again, going back to whatever we're calling the announcer, Jim Smallman here. So this match happens, the finish happens, we have a fork used, a fork and a decoy fork, and then the announcer Smallman is just like, well, that's a great win for Gibson, and he shows like no outrage at all for the fact that a fork was just used.
All right, I'm going to share my Smallman opinions now then, because that's exactly, so throughout this show, he's less of a commentator and more of a reporter. Like he's got no emotion or fire or anything to put over anything that's happening. He will just report in I've got
it's
examples
a top of the
later.
hour BBC News update.
He's literally just running down the moves of what just happened, and
he's saying what's happening, not reacting to what's happening.
No, and he's not telling a story. He's not giving me any backstory about any of these guys. Like all the stuff that you told me at the top, Kyle, I heard none of that throughout any of this show. Like there's a lot of like he's literally just reporting the moves that are happening and then reports when the finish happened. And that's it. Like it's not commentating on a pro wrestling show.
And it's definitely not built for dropping in randomly on a show. We talk about on our podcast how much we appreciate when announcers will really lay things out for you. Joey Styles was very good at that. Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, even Gordon Solie back in the day. This was not that.
Well, because you're talking as a commentator, you've got to talk to your hardcore fans that have been there since day one, but you've got to talk to the fans that are, this is their first show. They're dropping in, they're checking it out, they're giving it a chance. And because you've always got to be thinking that your audience is growing. So how are you catching them up on what's going on? And how are you also catering to your hardcore fans who have been here since day one and giving them little nuggets to move things forward as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. I totally agree. I know eventually they moved to a 2-man booth. I don't know if Smallman continues to do commentary or not, but because I'll often I watch early Ring of Honor a lot, and I dog on Gabe Sapolsky and his commentary because he's very he's the complete opposite. Like he tries too hard to give you every single little detail about every single little storyline going on. And that can get a little bit annoying in its own way, but I could definitely see, especially you guys coming in cold, not knowing really any of the backstory. But to be fair, this opener didn't really have any backstory. A lot of these matches actually, because a lot of it's very main event heavy, this show. And I suppose the no DQ match has a storyline to it, which they touch on a little bit. But again, there's not many layers to it, really. Yeah,
I mean, I'm yelling and screaming during the Sumerian Death Squad match, and Jim Smallman's just reporting in the facts that are happening, and I'm like, dude, this is so exciting. Why are you not going nuts?
My favorite is when somebody will do a crazy move, and he'll be like, oh, fuck me, mate.
He has a little bit of British Kevin Gill poking through there.
Yes, absolutely. But let's talk about some suspenders.
Boy.
So we got
the fashion corner on this one. This is in its own way, it's almost as offensive to me as Easy Money's gear back in the day.
Easy Money's gear though is gross. This is just wacky and silly.
I wouldn't say it's gross, but it does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable still, because it's on the top you are roadkill without a shirt. And then on the bottom, you are just wearing regular trunks. It's a look. I mean, I guess it stands out. I remember it. There aren't too many of these other guys, looks that I could really pick out of a lineup. So he's got that going for him, I guess.
And of course, we're talking about Shay Samuels and his open challenge. Kyle Ashmore versus Shay Samuels, who
Shaw Samuels.
Shaw Samuels.
How dare you?
Yes. Is he a descendant of Hack Myers?
Man, there is nobody else on the planet that knows about Hack Myers than you two guys. Can we talk about Hack Myers for a second? The phenomenon that is Hack Myers.
Absolutely. Hack Myers, I'll just say he's one of those guys though that it's so funny because Jeremy and I both grew up in the Chicago area where we did not have ECW on TV in 95, 96, the heyday of Hack Myers. And so the only time you saw Hack Myers' name, you heard about the fact that he was this ECW arena phenomenon, but you never saw him. And then actually seeing him, I'm like, oh, I guess I really needed to be there to get the whole deal.
He's the Shaw. Shaw. That's all it is. He's one of the worst wrestlers of all time, but he's the most over at some points.
Which in some ways is the story of ECW.
Skill played no part in who was over or not. As long as you had a funny haircut and.
Yes, but ECW is not what you called. We have.
Yeah, no, this is even though there's fork stabbings and maybe a little cannibalism later in the show, but we're not there yet.
Not there yet.
So we got Shay Samuels versus Kyle Ashmore. So this
from
is
the Projo, which
the Projo,
as someone who's not a hardcore progress aficionado, I spent the majority of the rest of this show trying to figure out if that's the best or worst name for a wrestling training school, and I have yet to come to a conclusion.
Well, hey, do you get it?
The Progress
It's the
Dojo.
Progress Dojo.
Yeah, we got it. We're trying to.
That's not the issue.
Yeah,
that was not the issue. I was just.
I'm in on good name. I'm in on good name. I'm putting a vote in. I like it. I like it.
See, I was leaning pretty heavily towards. I think I really hate this, but hearing
that's most stuff.
The problem is I'm not a big fan of fun in my wrestling. I'm not a real big fan of whimsy when it comes to the grappling, and this pegs the whimsy meter pretty high. But I'll defer to both of you.
This pegs the whimsy meter pretty high, he says. That's the first time that sentence has been uttered on this podcast.
T-shirt.
There we go. It's my property now. But it's a Projo Open challenge. God damn it. Now it sounds weird to me now.
No, it's good. It's still good.
Mission accomplished.
No, it's still good.
It sounds like a slur of some sort.
It sounds like a slur, or it sounds like another stab at creating like an Ico Pro type product.
Yes, that's what it is.
I need to have a Projo shake and then work out so I can get big and get higher.
Projo. Yes. But it's a Projo Open Challenge that Shay Samuels is having, and Kyle Ashmore is the one that accepts. So this is Kyle Ashmore's first Progress show. As we mentioned, he's from the Projo. And so he's relatively new to the game, I suppose. Not a lot to the match, I'll be honest. I mean, this Kyle Ashmore fella, he seems like a ginger John Silver to me. If anybody needs like a visual aid.
Jeremy, that must be why you texted me and said how big of a fan you were of Kyle Ashmore.
That text never was sent.
Jeremy Deemer, not a fan of the John Silver.
I am not. I am the biggest anti John Silver guy, and I sometimes I feel alone. Especially when I'm at an AEW show, I feel alone being anti-John Silver. But
you think you feel alone? I'm the anti-Danhausen guy, so think how I feel. But anyway, no, it's a good comp.
It is a good comp, yes.
Kyle Ashmore, he's again with the understanding that he's very early on in his career. He's totally fine here. He is certainly that guy that I mentioned earlier that is training to wrestle the same style that every other indie wrestler in every corner of the world wrestles, but he's completely inoffensive.
Yeah, no, he definitely fits the bill of what you guys were talking about earlier about how a lot of guys kind of wrestled the same way, like you just mentioned, and Kyle Ashmore is the epitome of that. But like you said, he's very early on in his career, so that's to be expected, and he held his own in this match for what it was. I mean, the only notable spot in this match for me was when Shay hit a spine buster and got a 2 count. And Shay, I've never seen anybody more livid at a referee than Shay Samuels got here. The referee was in the fetal position, and Shay Samuels, his trunks were right here. I'll say that. Didn't know what he was trying to do here, but it is, Brit Rest after all.
There was also one other weird thing that happened in this match where Shay runs at Kyle Ashmore. Kyle's near the ropes. Shay runs at him and then just takes a flat back bump for no reason at all. I don't know if he thought that Kyle Ashmore was going to hit him with a super kick or hit him with something, but he just takes a flat back bump as though it's, like an Eddie Guerrero spot where you're doing the fake cheat, throw the belt, the ref doesn't see it, you take a bump. But it was just somebody forgot something here.
Yeah. There's a few timing issues here, but yeah.
Shay wins with a pile driver, gets the pin. Like you mentioned, not a lot to this. And I was mostly disappointed because we didn't get any spot where Ashmore would snap the suspenders of Samuels. They must be saving that for a bigger match. But
that's a sign of a rookie right there.
There you go.
It looked so obvious. I was waiting for it the whole time and never got it.
I think we learned what they do and don't teach at the Projo.
Not a lot of suspenders drills.
No.
But maybe that's how they learned. Maybe they added it.
It's the graduate course.
Yeah. You get an IRS in there or a Madcap Moss. You got to know what to do when you're in that situation. But yeah, Kyle Ashmore, he goes for a pretty sweet looking spiral tap, but misses. And like you said, pile driver by Shaw for the win. But after that, we got maybe my match of the night here.
Yes. I'm so excited to talk about this match.
Yes. Business picks up here for sure. And what we talked about earlier, as far as you can tell watching this show who the stars are going to be. And I don't know if there's any better description of that than seeing Tommy End, the future Aleister Black, the future Malachi Black out here just among all these other wrestlers, particularly because most of the other guys on this show that would go on to be big stars, they're not really the fully formed version of who they would be as a star. Whereas here, Tommy End in 2015, he's every bit of Aleister Black / Malachi Black that you would see in more modern times. Like, he's there.
But when he comes out on the entrance ramp, so he comes out on the stage before going down the stairs, right? Comes out on the stage. Him and Michael Dante, his tag team partner, the Sumerian Death Squad. Now, I do not look ahead to the card when I watch a show. I like to be surprised at what's going to happen here. So,
except for when I text you and say, "Oh my God, it's Reno Riggins against Iron Mike Sharp for 15 minutes." You excited?
I said, yes, no spoilers. And so I try to avoid the card ahead of time. So I have no idea who the Sumerian Death Squad is off the top of my head, hearing this introduction. And when they come out, I immediately said, "Oh, that looks like a low rent version of Malachi Black there." And then as he emerges from the lighting into a more well-lit camera angle, I'm like, "Oh no, that's Tommy End." And they put the chyron on the bottom. I'm like, "Sure is." I'm like, "This is exciting." And so I'm ready to watch him go here against two dudes that I've never heard of, and I had to look up. These are like, I don't know about Chuck Mambo, but is he just like a random indie geek, or did
Chuck
he
Mambo
do anything?
is still around? Chuck Mambo is actually a featured wrestler in current day Rev Pro, and it is always a trip to see Chuck Mambo mixing it up with Young Lions and future New Japan main eventers.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
And he really is no different than he is here as a very young wrestler in 2015. He is still every bit the Chuck Mambo that you see here. These guys, it's Chuck Mambo and Pastor William Ever. And they look like men who should die at the hands of the Sumerian Death Squad within a matter of seconds.
Yes, I was like, oh, okay. When I saw these guys come out, I'm like, ugh, this is overdone.
Are you guys besmirching the name of Sweet Jesus?
That's right. I forgot. As a team, they are Sweet Jesus. Yes, I forgot.
See, now I will say that's a much better tag team name, Sweet Jesus, than
not Sweet Jesus.
That almost went another direction.
That's bubblegum.
God, there you go. But no, Sweet Jesus, I will take that as a tag team name over Projo for the dojo. That's kind of where I'm at on that.
Both are good. I approve of both names. They're both fantastic. So yeah, I was very excited to see the Sumerian Death Squad do a number on these guys here.
But yeah, this is the first time I've seen the Sumerian Death Squad. I've heard of them. I'm aware they were big in WXW previously to this. And you got Chuck Mambo and Pastor William Ever, who are graduates of the Projo, so they learned the suspender drills, I guess.
Yes.
weren't able to apply it here, but they could have if they had the chance.
Well, and who knows if Tommy End had stayed around in WWE long enough, he may have had suspenders.
Hey,
Yeah, boy, speaking of Tommy End and his partner here, Michael Dante, could two guys have taken more different career paths. Like, wow, like these two.
So what has happened to Michael Dante?
Yeah, I have never seen or heard of Michael Dante in my life until this.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
I pulled him up. He just, indies, like a lot of indies, like never anything big.
More Jannetty than Jannetty as far as the trajectory of the tag team.
No, Jannetty had a run. But
that's why I said more Jannetty than Jannetty.
Yeah.
No, this guy didn't do anything of note, like beyond the independent scene.
Well, I don't know when Tommy End started teaming with Brody King. I don't know if that was recently or if that was around this era. But the whole time I'm watching this, because as we're recording this, Brody King, Malachi Black are teaming on AEW, and I couldn't help but make the comparisons.
Yeah,
Michael Dante is almost like a smaller version of Brody King, a less tattooed version of him.
I mean, that's kind of like saying I'm a smaller version of Brock Lesnar. Like he is a smaller,
factually true.
Yeah, it is factually true, but burying the lead a little bit. But no, he is definitely smaller. He is also, I mean, the thing I'll say about Dante teaming with Tommy End here is that traditionally in tag teams you always had the very sort of like just meat and potatoes guy who wasn't very impressive, and then you had the really impressive guy, whether it be Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart is always the best example of that, or a British Bulldog and a Dynamite Kid. At least you could say that with this, like, who the guy in the tag team is. It is undoubtedly Tommy End. Whereas I feel like when you see a Brody King and Malachi Black together, it's almost like, obviously not size wise, but like a skyscrapers deal where it's, both guys are the top guy.
There were several spots, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying. There were several spots in this match where you have like Tommy End in the ring. He's just doing all these Muay Thai roundhouse kicks and flying knees and pump kicks to both guys, one after the other. And then Tommy End will just tag in Michael Dante, and he'll just run in, just clothesline people just over and over again. So it's like a very meat and potatoes verse with the Tommy End, who's more the flash of the team.
Very sad when those tags took place. Thankfully we had, and not that he was horrible, but he just took up space, whereas Tommy End just leaps off the screen.
Boy, he does. This is one of those, we're gonna talk about it again later with some of the guys towards the main event. But man, Tommy End, he jumps off the screen. He's you can tell that this guy's he's different than everybody. He's on a higher level, and you can tell he's gonna ascend to bigger. This guy's a star, and the people reacted to him that way from the start.
And you could tell to my point earlier, like even here in 2015, there was nothing he needed to add to his game. Like you could have taken him 2015 out of this and stuck him into the upper card of New Japan, and he would have fit right away, like every bit as much as he would now if he went.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely the one that stuck out. But to be fair, I mean, the match in general, I mean, it slapped. It was a great match.
This was great.
All four guys played their part.
I thought a little too much offense for Sweet Jesus. I could have
it was because you have the Sumerian Death Squad, which the name alone just has this intimidation factor about it. And then you see the guys involved in it. I was these are some pretty big dudes. And then you have Chuck Mambo, who looks like the Owen Hart impersonator from the Nation skit.
Yes.
And you have Pastor William Ever, otherwise known as Bill Ever. Gang.
Believer.
Got it. Do we get it?
It's no Projo, but it's pretty good.
Nice.
It took me a few chapters to realize that myself. But you think it's going to be a squash match? I mean, I'm looking at this. We're watching a 1995 Raw. I mean, these guys are just going to get squashed like bugs. But no, it's pretty 50-50, I would say, like you said.
It's too 50-50. Like the action is great, but my takeaway, like as I look at my notes, it was like, good match. But these guys got way too much offense. Like I have no problem with them having a short period of offense, but as this match goes on and on, like it is, to your point, 50-50 back and forth. And I don't need to see Chuck Mambo getting near falls on Tommy End. Like what hope spot, one roll up, 2 count, Tommy End hit him with the jumping knee, and it's fine. Again, it's indie shows. You want to give everybody great matches. You don't want to do squash matches, but I'm a big proponent of when you have a match that looks and feels like there's a big imbalance between where the guys are at. Let's go with that. Let's not try to make it back and forth like every other match on the show.
Yeah. I also added that the tag division in progress at this point is very thin.
Okay.
As we can kind of tell by the tag team title matches later. But so I could see this as a way of them building up that division by adding another credible team in Sweet Jesus. Which Pastor William Ever specifically is super over with the crowd. Chuck Mambo's pretty over as well. So they're like inexplicably like beloved by the crowd. So I can see, you know, giving them some offense in, building up their credibility to maybe one day, maybe potentially challenge for the titles. I don't know if they ever win the tag team titles or not. I try to stay in the dark in terms of that kind of stuff. But
I mean, to your point though, that it is true that, you know, you look at these guys, you look at, you know, some of the other guys we already talked about. To me, Eddie Dennis is another one, and Wild Boar that we see later, that if you're just dropping in and you see these guys wrestle, you have no idea why they're as over as they are, but they are with these 700 people in the audience. So, you know, who am I to say as someone dropping in that these guys shouldn't be getting offense when the crowd likes it, the crowd wants them to. And so, you know, you're booking to your crowd. You're not booking to someone watching 7 years later for a podcast.
Yeah. One of my favorite spots. So they're working over the leg of Tommy End. He's able to kick his way free and make the tag to Dante. Dante runs wild. Huge boot to the face of the pastor. The pastor fights back. He comes off the top with a cross body and gets a 0 count. One of my favorite spots of the match. Just not even a 1 count. I popped huge for that.
And that's absolutely what should happen to what we said earlier. These guys getting a 0 count on Tommy End, spot of the show.
Yeah, and I would say the major like significant spots were to the favor of Sumerian Death Squad. Like there's one point where Michael Dante does a hip toss on one of the guys, and then Tommy End does a roundhouse kick while that guy's upside down. Just really good cohesion between both teams, really. There's one like spot where the Death Squad, they basically bounce William Ever off the rope, make him do a backflip and face plant onto the mat. Good combinations by Sweet Jesus too, like Enziguri, you know, clothesline, kind of just one after the other kind of stuff. It's like they've been teaming for forever. I don't know if they had teams before this on other shows or not, but it felt like they had. We get a clothesline from heaven from Jesus, of course.
Yes, and Tommy End did a full flip for it. So yeah,
I think that's where I got mad.
Heaven.
I appreciate the fact that he was doing that, but I'm like, no, I don't want to see Tommy End take a full flip up for a clothesline.
Are you
for
telling
the
me
pastor.
If Jesus clotheslined you wouldn't go inside out?
I mean, I guess it depends on what was going to. When I saw the white light, if he was going to be able to tell me that I was going to be going to the good place and not the bad place, I probably would have taken a bump over the top rope for that.
Yeah. Would you say you couldn't William Eve in that?
Yes.
Pause for laughter.
There you go. I feel like I would have had to go back to the Projo and learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I had some qualms with the finish here, where so Pastor gets cut off going for a superplex. Okay, Dante has him held for. So Dante has him held for knees from Tommy End. Then Dante power bombs the pastor onto the knees of Tommy End, and this was not the finish. I was like, oh my gosh, how is that? I thought that was it, and
that was a bridge too far. I agree.
That should have been the spot, because then they followed up with the suplex by Tommy into the catch by Dante, power slam for the pin. What you see from the modern day Brody King, Malachi Black finish, which is fine, but it's tough to follow after watching the power bomb onto the knees of Tommy.
I don't love that as a finish. I don't know, maybe if they just haven't hit it clean in AEW, but every time, and it was kind of the same here. It's that I forget what they call it, the Kings of the Black Throne. I forget what their finisher is called, but it's like you said, the suplex throw into a power slam. Which, by the way, here it's called Black Mass, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, it's very underwhelming after all the.
It's hard to finish. It's hard to follow up. Like when you have a spectacular move, then you go to that as a finish. That could be a totally fine, good finish. I like it, but it's hard when it's the penultimate move to it is something more spectacular.
Well, we could do a whole podcast about guys whose setup moves or teams whose setup moves are better and more devastating looking than their finishers.
Yes.
I think to your point though about that sort of suplex throw into the power slam finisher, least from what I've seen, whether it be here, or like you said, the few times that the House of Black has done it on AEW, like for that move to look impactful, the power slam needs to be happening like as the guy is coming toward you, almost like it's all one motion. Because if you're catching him and then there's a pause and then you're doing a power slam, essentially you're just doing a power slam. And that's not a finisher unless it's the early 90s and you're Davey Boy Smith.
Right.
He at least gets a running start.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Viking Raiders, their move, it's like a way better version of this. He tosses the guy way up in the air, and then it's like the impact of up to down, adds to the impact.
You think about even back in the day, Goldberg would do that press slam, drop to the shoulder, and a power slam all in one motion, but it would be all in one motion. And in some ways, as a bit of an aside, I always thought that looked more impressive than the jackhammer.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Little Braun Breaker does it, I believe, if you guys are NXT 2.0 fans.
Who isn't?
Exactly. As we record this on a Tuesday night instead of watching NXT.
Tape machines are rolling. Maybe.
Yes, they are, certainly. But so Sumerian Death Squad gets the win there.
Yeah, my match of the night by a mile so far. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so far it's nothing even close. Like this is like I said, would like to see a little bit less 50-50, but the action was awesome. We got to see peak Tommy End, so no complaints.
Yeah. I mean, I was watching the match and I was like, this match is good, but it could use some coat hangers. So I was really pleased when the next match happened. It's a no disqualification match between Mark Haskins and Rampage Brown. So the backstory here, because maybe they didn't lay it out in commentary. So Haskins and Brown, they are former stablemates. They were in a faction called Screw Indie Wrestling. But basically, there was a situation where Rampage, he was given the option by Jim Smallman. You could either have a match with Samoa. You could have a match with Samoa Joe if you want, but in order for that to happen, you have to leave your faction. And the Rampage was like, "Oh yeah, mate, yeah, let's do that." So Haskins was obviously disrespected by this, and so that's kind of led to the hostility. And then a few chapters ago, Rampage actually had a title match. But earlier in the show, Haskins jumped him, injured his leg. And then a few chapters after that, they had a match in which Haskins got himself DQ'd by introducing a chair to the match. And that's that's why this is no DQ. So you can't have that finish anymore. So that's basically the backstory to this match and why it's happening. But, yeah, man, this match, it felt like just a scrappy fight, which I think for a street fight kind of match is kind of what you should be going for, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I was impressed by how much this felt like a fight, because I feel like a lot of times on indie shows, you'll have street fights and there'll be no rules, but it's mostly just guys doing all their moves and then maybe a few plunder spots here or there. Nothing drives me more crazy than when it's the culmination of a feud. It's a street fight. And then what are we doing? We're doing headlocks and arm drags and indie standoff spots for 2 minutes. And thankfully, this did start off violent and aggressive.
Yeah, a lot of fighting on their knees, a lot of biting, hair pulling, stiff strikes, all the stuff that you want from this kind of match.
Guys getting thrown through rows of chairs. We had Haskins get thrown through 5 rows of chairs, which begs the question, is for each match on the card that you move up, can you knock out an additional row of chairs?
You might be joking on that, but that sounds like a thing they would do. Like, how many rows can you throw this guy through?
You get in big trouble if you do 4 instead of 5.
The good thing is, these chairs get messed up, but everyone at indie shows are always so accommodating for where their seats are that I'm sure there's no issues when everyone sets their chairs back up and everyone's right back in the same spots that they were before.
Yeah.
He says, tongue. Well, hopefully at this show, at least, it wasn't double sold tickets like the old Ring of Honor.
I think,
my God, talk about being able to do other podcasts, early Ring of Honor shows, and buying a ticket and then finding out that 3 other parties also have the same 4 tickets that you have.
I'll get you guys on one of my Ring of Honor shows one day, and we'll definitely dive into that.
Oh yeah, no, have some stories for sure.
Yeah, because I was watching these chair spots getting whipped into the chairs, and I'm thinking about the barricade spots from early Ring of Honor when they would just every match this barricade just get ripped out.
Fun barricade story. I broke a bone in my hand. In suburban Milwaukee at a Ring of Honor show. Second match. I was second row. I was so excited that the person in front of me had vacated their seat. I'm like, I'm going to bang a barricade. And then I did, and I felt a pop.
Oh boy. Fun barricade story. That's never a good ending.
No, definitely not. It's never as fun as it sounds.
So this is the match where in my notes, I call out that the commentary is making me mad, because here, after Haskins gets sent into the fourth row of chairs, Brown then hits him with a hard chair shot to the back, and the commentary gets into full reporting mode. And basically says, ludicrous shot to the back with the chair, he says in a matter-of-fact description. It was very where the crowd is like shocked at the sounds of the impact of this chair. Just matter-of-fact reporting.
When we're talking about crowd and sounds in this match, can someone please explain to me why every time Mark Haskins is on offense, the crowd proceeds to make the most annoying sound in the world for the entire match? They're just like, it just goes on and on. Like I was watching with my earbuds in, like I usually do, and then I had to take them out for the rest of the match because it was too intense.
Yeah. This is when they went from sober to buzzing like a bumblebee in this match.
Yes.
I guess there's chanting hat. They drag out the hat for literally 3 minutes at a time. But yeah, chair shots all throughout this match. Rampage goes for one off the second rope, but Rampage goes for it off the second rope, but Haskins punches the chair into Rampage's face. So we get a spot. So Rampage falls into a tree of woe on the outside, so like on the apron area, so that Haskins can, I guess, drop kick the chair into his face. It looked a little wonky, but
it looked very contrived. Like it was one of those things that I'm sure sounded cool in his head, but anytime you have a chair shot assist or chair assisted move that requires that much cooperation from the guy that's getting hit, never looks great.
No, yeah, for sure. Haskins sets up a chair in the corner in between the second and third rope. But lo and behold, he ends up running right into it after Rampage reverses, and then gets decapitated with a clothesline from Rampage. Haskins eventually fights back. He locks in I don't know what you call it, but it's like a flipping arm bar. Tommaso Ciampa used to do it when he like flips over his guy, so he's like facing the opposite way.
Almost like I wrote this down in my notes, like a perpendicular one-armed cattle mutilation.
There we go. That sounds perfect.
Haskins
that probably made it sound more confusing though when you said it. It's in my brain and on my notes, so I had to get it out.
Yeah, on this offensive flurry here, he throws some huge kicks, like just great kicks by Haskins. I was impressed.
Haskins is also one of those guys that when you see him in a match like this, he wrestles bigger than he is.
Yeah.
And so it's, you watch this match and it's him and Rampage Brown. Rampage, big intimidating guy, and you're like, oh, I don't know how this is going to work visually. And then you're halfway through the match and you're not even seeing that difference at all. I was also, just as an aside, really impressed by Rampage Brown here. I had not seen a whole lot of him. I had heard a lot about him. And I remember there being a time period where New Japan had been taking a look at him and it sounded like he was going to be coming in. He obviously went a different direction, but I thought he looked awesome in this match.
Yeah, Rampage is great for sure, especially because like you, I wasn't too familiar with him until I started watching all these progress shows, and he's won me over for sure. Just a no nonsense heavyweight. He just does everything well.
Again, it stands out on a show with a lot of guys that are doing that cruiserweight style.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe my favorite part of this match. So there's a table set up in the corner.
Oh God, this table. When I saw this table, I immediately was like, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, this is not a Mattel table that's pre-cut to fall in the middle.
No, this table would make the tables of Japan blush.
Yes, this was a supersized version of a Japanese table, or this was like one of those, timekeepers or announcers tables from the late 70s, early 80s on shows where guys would get kind of haphazardly thrown into, and there was no way that it was ever going to break. Here, for some reason, that's what they were using in 2015.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so Rampage, is the table set up in the corner. Rampage power bombs Mark Haskins into this table. The table doesn't budge an inch. Mind you, this is Rampage Brown, who is a strong fella, to say the least. Mark Haskins, who is not a small man himself. So you have all of this weight and momentum going towards the table.
Yeah, it's a
does not
running
budge.
start. This isn't just a standing powerbomb. He's trying to running like awesome bomb him through the table.
So brutal.
Yeah. But then he does it again because he has to break the table. You can't just not break the table. So he does it again, and the table kind of breaks, I guess, enough to satisfy
It breaks
the crowd.
high. It doesn't break in
Yeah.
the middle. And it did not look pleasant at all.
The imagery of Rampage, he hits that second powerbomb, and then him looking lovingly at
Yes.
the table.
He's like
I wanna,
laying on the ground looking at it. It was great camera work. This show, particularly early on in the show, I had some issues with the kind of the production of it, but that was a major league wrestling. I'm not talking MLW. Like that was a major league wrestling camera shot they got there.
Absolutely. But yeah, so Rampage, he comes off the second rope for something, but Haskins throws a chair at him.
Wait, first
hits
of
him in
all,
the
he
face.
kicked out of that table spot.
Yeah, that
Which-
made me angry.
I mean,
It did. I'm like, sometimes indie wrestling is annoying this way.
well, the thing is, Rampage was looking at the table lovingly for too long. I mean, he just got distracted. So that gave Haskins, there's storytelling elements in there.
He was admiring his work. Jim Ross would have been so angry by his lack of immediate follow-up.
That's
We could do a
another
whole podcast
podcast.
on
That's
it.
And he
another
also,
podcast.
Jim Ross also on commentary would have talked about how that didn't make sense.
Oh, wow. Why is there a table under the ring? We're just keeping tables under the ring now? Shut up, JR.
Always love when modern day JR decides to do a wrestling critique podcast live on the air of the broadcast that he's doing.
Dude, he commentates like a podcast.
Yes,
which
he
is
does,
like,
yes.
he is, I guess, nowadays. But JR's not here. But you know who is here? Haskins. And you know what he has? Some coat hangers. And
Fulfilling your dreams and wishes from a few minutes ago.
oh, thank God. What are the odds? Because Haskins, he pulls out like a bag, and I'm like, oh, is it thumbtacks? Is it Legos? Or what is it? But it's coat hangers. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here. I had no idea what was going to happen next. So Haskins takes the coat hanger and fish hooks Rampage with it. Blood's pouring out of Rampage's mouth. I mean, not pouring. It's dripping at a relative rate. But then Haskins, as if that's not enough. So Rampage is bleeding from the mouth. Haskins goes back under the ring, pulls out a can of salt, and pours a big pile of it in his hand, and then throws the salt into Rampage's mouth.
Literally rubbing salt on the wounds of the man.
A literal pouring salt in the wounds of Rampage.
Yes.
Loved
Hold
it.
on. Let me get this. Fuck, it's not playing. That was a drum.
There it is. Yes.
It was worth the
Perfect
wait.
timing.
Worth it. Worth
Well,
it.
we're talking about an indie show too, so the timing doesn't have to be perfect. Just bake that in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, live in progress with the gimmick.
This is progress, I'm chanting.
But yeah, regardless of the salt and the wound, Rampage is able to hit a Samoan drop onto Haskins, followed by a pile driver so Rampage has him up for the pile driver. There's a chair in front of him. So he's trying to jump forward onto the chair, but I kind of misses.
Yeah.
It looked fine enough. I mean, it's a pile driver, a jumping pile driver, so it's devastating enough. It's a believable finish.
Exactly. That's totally fine. I was amused by the fact that, to me, this salt was like the modern day garbage wrestling Brit Rest version of the Macho Man Randy Savage reviving elbow drop. In that this salt, not only was it salt in the wounds, but it woke Rampage up. He did not take another move after having salt rubbed in his wounds. He hit two moves and got the win.
Yeah, that's the opposite of Kryptonite
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah, no, this was a fun fight, and it was a different style than anything else we've seen on the show. This was great, and we loved. I felt like it was you probably could have shaved a few minutes off of this. Felt it went pretty long, and so some of the later stuff felt a little rushed, but this was still fun for what it was.
I believe they hated each other, and that's the number one thing in the
100%.
street fight. So mission accomplished there.
Exactly. It felt like they were fighting each other, not having a match with weapons, basically.
Exactly. And particularly on a show like this, where I think somewhat because of the crowd and just also because of the style, so much of this felt like a wrestling show exhibition, almost bordering on sometimes like self-parody, and not that the action wasn't good, but just the way the crowd responses were. A lot of times it was hard to really slip in and feel invested, whereas I did feel invested in this, and I had not seen anything of this feud up until then.
Yeah, for sure. But then this is basically where intermission happens, and Jim Smallman, he announces the Super Strong Style 16 tournament, which is a annual tournament that Progress does, still to this day, I believe. In this first tournament, the winner will get a Progress Championship match. You guys familiar with this tournament at all?
So this is the one that Flash Morgan Webster won to get his title shot. Is that?
So that's a different tournament. Now, guys, I'm realizing now they do a lot of tournaments here.
Got it.
So this was sort of their version of kind of like a 24 karat or doing a bola. Basically, their TPI, their version of the big annual tournament to bring in guys from outside the company, get some people traveling in to watch the show that weren't local, that sort of deal.
It seems like a carbon copy of the 16 karat to me, but I've never seen it. But that's my impression of what it is.
Yeah.
Gotcha. They bring in like a Ciampa. They bring in who else? I looked at the card the other night. The Walter comes in. Some guys that from like you said, other countries get flown in, and it's a little international flair to it. So looking forward to watching that. But it's basically announced on this chapter.
I bet I will guarantee you actually that any of the matches on that show are probably better than the match we're about to see.
Here we go, tag team championship. Let's talk about it.
Tag team championship, and Jeremy, I feel like we've really decried the tag team division in certain eras of certain promotions we've watched on our podcast. I think of an episode I think earlier this season on Wrestling at Random where it was 95 or 96 Survivor Series. And or SummerSlam, remember the tag division?
It was 96 SummerSlam. Yeah,
it had the Body Donnas as faces. It had the Smoking Guns as heels.
The Godwins.
The Godwins. There was one other tier, and the New Rockers.
The New Rockers
of a bleach blonde Bob Holly and Leaf Cassidy. Al Snow. I thought that was a rough tag team division. That was a rough scene for the tag team titles. Here, with the Faceless and their opponents, Wild Boar and Eddie Dennis, I felt like I was back on that SummerSlam show. I was looking for a Body Donna's run-in.
So let's talk about the Faceless first. Now,
can we not?
Yeah, do we have to? Are we contractually obligated to?
I got excited, Adam. I got excited when I heard that the team was called the Faceless and they were going to come out all creepy. I'm like, oh, you know what this is? Like, I'm getting real All Japan Blackhearts vibes.
Yes, Blackhearts. I also, when they came out, this reminded me of Starrcade 90 when the Black Scorpion was introduced.
I swear to God, I was going to bring that up.
The 10 other Black Scorpions came down the ring as the UFO descended from the ceiling.
Yeah,
but
I watched that match recently. I watched that match because shout out to the Fretzelmania podcast. He had me on his show to cover Starrcade 1990. And I would never forgive him for it because, like you said, the main event was, and I'm comparing this to this match because we had the Faceless versus Eddie Dennis and Wild Boar for the Progress titles. And the reason I compare it to that match or that show is because that show is headlined by Sting versus the Black Scorpion, who is a figure. He just had black sweater, black mask, black clothes. He was a mysterious man. Nobody knew his identity. And I was watching that Starrcade match, and I was like, why is this match so awful? And it's because Ric Flair, who was the Black Scorpion, spoiler alert, couldn't do any of his Ric Flair things.
Yep.
He couldn't do any of his moves. He couldn't do any of his mannerisms. In fact, he had to actively keep him inside. So what resulted was him not doing anything. And
what resulted was if Ric Flair had been forced to train at the WWE Performance Center, if it existed back in the day, that would have been the end product. That wrestler.
Very much so. But that's kind of what we got here with Faceless number 1 and Faceless number 2.
Accompanied by Faceless number 3. Don't forget Faceless number 3.
How can I forget?
They wear masks that feature faces on them. This is where they went wrong. This is where they should have followed the Blackhearts.
Most faces.
Well, they should have gone full Super Invader style and just worn a red sock.
Just a sock. Yeah.
On their face.
Yes, they had faces. So
they also were. Well, they were both masked. The Faceless 1 and 2 that were in the match. They're both wearing masks. They're both wearing the cargo pants and the black shirt. you can tell them apart. They do have different physiques.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys know who they were?
No.
So one was Danny Garnell, who you may not know. He's kind of an obscure British.
Was that the smaller one?
Wrestler.
The smaller guy?
No, he was the bigger lad.
Okay.
The other one was Ligero.
Really?
I believe, actually. Because I've heard Ligero was a part of this, and you go back and look at it, his physique is very Ligero-esque.
And he was not terrible comparatively in this match.
Well, the thing of it, neither of them are terrible, but they can't do their moves that they do. Right. So they can't do anything. They can do is punch and headlock, and that's pretty much what this match was. A lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of the "What's your safe word" chant at.
Yeah. Well, I was my whole thing with this, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. Anything else we can say about this match is eclipsed by the journey that I went on in my mind when I saw the Faceless come out with those shields, that the two like jigsaw puzzle type of shields that are combined to be one shield. And it looks
like it's the yin and yang like necklace that my daughter would have with her best friend, and they can put it together.
Yes.
Like that's what the shield is.
I was so much more okay with that being part of this horribly lame Faceless act. But when it was revealed on commentary towards the end of this match that was, in fact, the tag team championship of the Progress World, I need an explanation from Jim Smallman or someone as to why they thought that was a good idea.
It's cool for that first, because like the first champions were Eddie Dennis and Mark Andrews. So it's cool for that first shot. They put them together, like you said, obviously. But it's like now every champion thus thereafter just needs to carry these two halves of shields, like you said, get to carry them through the airport and put them in their luggage.
It's a cool tournament trophy. Like if they did an annual tag team tournament and that was what you got for winning, coolest freaking trophies ever.
So Eddie Dennis, speaking of coolest things ever, comes out to Andrew WK's Party Hard. Great theme choice. Thumbs up, Eddie Dennis.
Fashion corner, by the way, or at least visual appearance corner on Wild Boar and Eddie Dennis.
Sure.
I feel like if you melted them down and then reconstituted them, they would be one normal size wrestler. But Eddie Dennis is like 6'11" and 130 pounds. And then Wild Boar is like 4'3" and is the size of Rhino.
Yeah. It's like when you're creating a wrestler and you're like having fun with all the extremes.
Yeah, the slider going up and down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just watch the guy get elongated.
But so Eddie Dennis and Wild Boar, I'm a fans of both those guys. But most of this match is pretty much just the Faceless ganging up on Boar and Dennis, because you have the third Faceless out there getting involved a little bit, and he plays into the finish. But before we get there, Eddie Dennis, because Wild Boar is getting beat on most of this match. He's the smaller guy.
Oh, yeah. You would say, Adam, I had in my notes here, I was starting to feel like AWA 87's review where Marty Jannetty.
Yes.
They got the heat on Marty Jannetty for what might still be going on in 2022.
It just kept teasing the hot tag, and
yes,
with each time they cut it off, there was less and less and less and less interest. Yeah, no, I definitely had vibes of that as well.
At that point, it's just a tag.
The Faceless get no reaction from the people either. The people are not into this act.
They're annoyed at the Faceless at best.
Right.
When you think about like just like the flow of this show, what they've already seen, most recently they just saw that wild, awesome street fight, and then now they're seeing this. It's just it's an odd place to put it.
Gotta have a cool down match, brother.
If your tag team championships are the cool down match, then there's a problem with your tag team division. But
yeah,
far be it from me.
That's fair. But Eddie Dennis, he gets the not hot tag. He gets a tag, destroys everybody, does a crazy like double. So he has one of the Faceless in a fall away slam position. He has the other one in a Samoan drop position.
That was
like
pretty
a double
cool.
move.
Yeah.
That was very impressive.
And,
Eddie Dennis.
yes, I did not think that Eddie Dennis was going to pull off a power move like
he's
that.
a very strong dude. Like you see, like a lot of his
Apparently.
NXT UK matches, he'll do things. It's like, God, what? Because he's like 8 feet tall, but he's also 100 pounds. So it's like you don't think he's gonna be able to pick up a guy that big. But ultimately, the Faceless number 3 gets involved, hits Wild Boar in the face with one half of the Progress Shield. And then the Faceless in the ring hit a double stomp backpack stunner combination.
I'm sorry. This move is not okay. This is lame.
What's the problem with it?
It's one of those moves where it's like the double stomp is not doing anything to make the backpack stunner any worse than it would have been. I think probably what took me out of it more was that they tried it 30 seconds earlier.
They missed it earlier.
And it fell apart in spectacular fashion. They go for this, like a backpack something, and then the faceless guy and I think it was Wild Boar just awkwardly tumble to the mat.
No, Wild Boar fought out. Wild Boar fought out.
No, because Jim Smallman.
I'm not on camera. You don't see my eyes rolling back into my head here.
Do my best Byron Saxton impression over here.
yeah. Because
the announcer called it a backpack stunner I'm like, no, they just fell down. I did not even I'm like, that can't possibly be a backpack stunner. And then I saw him do it for real here in a minute.
Yeah, you need much more creative camera work and camera switching as a company if you're going to be able to call that an actually fully executed move. And then my radar always went up for what it does whenever there's a botched move like this. I'm always like, don't go back and do it again. Don't go back and do it again. Just try something else. And they went back and did it again. So that probably is a bit of my dislike of this finisher.
Yeah.
As unfair as it probably is.
No, that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't like to get stomped. I don't know what it adds to the stunner, but
true. Fair enough. The stomp is a move that is hurting you, separate from the stunner. So
the backpack stunner is already a weak looking move. That's also part of the problem. I'm not sold on it. No.
Well, have someone give it to you and report back your findings.
I think I get out a solid 2.8.
Yeah.
If I had trained at the Projo enough to really build up my ability to take punishment, I think I'd kick out at 2.8, 2.9 maybe.
So we've cooled down with your tag team title match, and now what do we transition to?
God, I've never gotten so mad at a PowerPoint slide in my life. So we got Flash Morgan Webster, the winner of the Natural Progression Series, versus Bubblegum.
Now, we don't need to talk much about Bubblegum. If we, I mean,
we do. We need to talk a lot about it.
We're gonna do a deep dive here.
First, Bubblegum looks as if you had in a video game combined Drake Younger and Kyle O'Reilly, but given him no talent, but thankfully also not some really questionable beliefs. Although maybe, who knows? I don't know.
It definitely, you definitely had like jacked referee trying to be a wrestler vibes. Like, yeah, I could see that. Like,
he also was like 2 or 3 different characters in one. Like, we talk about wrestling style, in-ring style. He's doing the India, I talked about again, the step up enziguri in the corner, the same top rope moves, everything. But then he's also trying to be this really sleazy, offensive heel. And those two things don't work well together at all.
If you wanted to play a drinking game, watching this match, take a drink every time Bubblegum sticks his hand in his tights and sniffs it.
Yeah. I like drinking and all, but not worth it.
The best part about it too is, and I say the best, I mean the worst. He's one of those guys that, like, it's clear that the act doesn't work, but he is 110% convinced that he's the most over thing, and he's going to be in the big time next week.
For sure. That if the right person sees this, it's going to be. You guys don't get it, but it's awesome.
When Gabe sees it and tells Hunter, you're going to be main eventing NXT. Just wait.
He's a few steps away from Grayson Waller. It's like if you took Grayson Waller and you put Fred Durst's face on him. That's basically what you would get here. But Bubblegum, I mean, he comes out, he's wearing, I think it's a Manchester City jersey he's wearing. I could be wrong on that. Soccer, for anybody who's unaware. And he comes out, he keeps lifting up his shirt to show his abs. He keeps reaching in his trunks, rubbing his balls, pulling out 2 fingers, which I believe is the middle finger over there.
And it all feels so much less entertaining than the way you're even describing it. Like, when he's doing it, it feels as though somebody's pushing a button on a video game remote controller, and then he's executing the taunt. Like, there's no, just don't buy it.
There's no reason for it. I mean, it's just like he's just doing it over and over again. And then he's facing Flash Morgan Webster. And ultimately, I mean, both these guys are super talented in the ring. I mean, they're both cruiserweight style guys. It's very fast paced. You can
Flash
argue
Morgan Webster is talented. We will end it there. He's the talented guy.
I'll say this: Bubblegum seems like an athletic fellow, but I am okay if I never see him again.
Yes, no, he has talent. He's one of those guys that there's talent there, but he has no idea how to put it together into being a coherent wrestler that like the matches actually work. But I thought Flash Morgan Webster looked awesome in this match. Like I think
he did.
As far as the athletic wrestlers we've seen on this show to this point, he is far and away the best of those guys.
And let me make one more point. He comes out to "In the City" by The Jam, another solid choice of a theme song,
yes, sir.
Especially for his full-on mod character. I'm in. Like this, I'm
worked.
A big fan of Flash Morgan Webster here.
Not only the entrance music, but then we get, I would say, probably the best crowd sing-along chant of the entire show with the Flash will tear you apart. I'm not going to try to sing because that would not be good for anybody, but that was great. Obviously riffing off of the Love Will Tear You Apart.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like every time Bubblegum, he'll do something impressive. Like Flash, at one point, he went for a poison Rana, but Bubblegum tried to counter it, but he had to like walk backwards. It took a lot of core strength and balance to like make him not fall over like the backpack stunner from the last match.
Yeah.
And then Bubblegum hits a one-winged angel for a 2 count, which is just bizarre to see.
Yeah, that was kind of weird for sure. A 2 count, and again, to your point, Jeremy, earlier, that was not sold as a big near fall from Smallman on commentary. And even if, let's say Kenny Omega wasn't using that move at that point, or let's say it wasn't an established finisher, that is still such a visually impressive move that I would like to hear an announcer, at least, I don't know, make it seem more than it's a side headlock takeover.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Flash Morgan Webster wills this crowd into this match because they are not into it, and until he starts to, he just puts, I'm gonna carry this match and I'm gonna get them into this match, and he did, and this was great towards the finish here.
And he's perpetual motion throughout. I mean, how about that slingshot, the pescado into the Rana on the floor? Super impressive. And that was maybe a minute or two into the match.
I mean, to this day, Flash Morgan Webster, he's silky smooth. Has some of the best strikes in wrestling, in my opinion, and just his combination with all his high flying offense. I mean, he's a pleasure to watch all the time.
Which, and the point about the strikes is key, because a lot of times guys that are great high flyers, that's one of the major weaknesses, you know. Yeah. You take a guy like Dante Martin, as incredible of a high flyer as he is, and he continues to improve. He's super young. You know, the strikes are a significant weak point, and definitely not here with Webster.
And when you got a guy who can connect with the crowd, like not just do cool moves, but like that you can see that he's got that crowd connection, and that's that it factor that he's got for sure.
Well, and it also bodes well then later in your career. You can pull back on that stuff. You know, as you get older, injuries start to take hold. Yeah. You're not going to have to be dependent on that to be able to still have that connection, get reactions, which you can't say the same for a lot of guys that wrestle a similar style.
Yeah. But in this match, ultimately, Flash, so Bubblegum is on the top rope. Flash runs up the ropes, hits a crazy Hurricane Rana. I thought he was going to break his neck, but he somehow pulls it off and follows it up with a 450 splash for the win. Just a really impressive finish, because you have doing the Rana in one corner, Bubblegum goes flying, Flash goes to the opposite corner, does the 450. It just looked really good.
And to your point about smoothness, that 450 was as perfectly executed as you'll see.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which a thing we haven't pointed out yet is Progress looks like they have actual ropes and not the cables like most modern wrestling does today.
Definitely more of a WWF style rope situation, combined with a very small ring, we should mention.
Yes, yeah, but so doing these high flying moves off of actual ropes instead of the cables, very impressive.
Absolutely. All right, so we're done with Bubblegum forever, hopefully.
Good riddance, Bubblegum.
So now we can talk about Jimmy Havoc.
What is this video promo?
First of all, I thought it was really well done. like for an indie show. Like this is high production here.
The cinematography was great.
Yeah, like the
some
execution was solid. Like I was impressed for an indie show.
I need a warning though when I'm going to see a man eat either a real or fake heart. I need someone to tell me that's coming because I did not need that.
Oh, you got to surprise people with that sometimes. I mean, the last chapter, the show opened with a similar kind of vignette here, but Jimmy Havoc stabbed a man to death. Blood was splattering. That's how we opened the show. Chapter
Lovely.
17. Now, chapter 18, we have him here in a similar kind of vignette. He's cutting a promo. He has like a white something on, there's blood all over it. I even forget what happened. The only thing I remember is him at the end. He had a plate of some meat, eating it with a fork, and it really disturbed me to my core. So
yeah, it was basically like flashing back and forth between like him doing really disturbing things, eating organs, and then him looking kind of a bit more normal, like at this kind of dinner table-y type thing. And those, in a weird way, to your point, those shots were almost more disturbing than the really over-the-top disturbing shots.
No, it's real. The movie like American Psycho. That's the kind of vibe you were getting.
I think that's what they were going for. Yeah, for sure.
I will defer to both of you guys because, as Jeremy knows, movies not my strong point.
But that leads us into the main event. The Progress Championship is on the line. We mentioned it earlier. Jimmy Havoc is defending it in a 6-man elimination match against Dave Mastiff, Paul Robinson, Marty Scurll, Noam Dar, and Will Ospreay.
6-man elimination. I'm very glad that that's what this was. I always get worried. I hate the idea of the champion being able to lose without ever having been pinned in a match or directly losing. So excited about that. And the story seems to be here that it's not quite 4-on-2, but it is 2 in the sense that Jimmy Havoc and Paul Robinson are aligned.
Yes. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, all like Marty Scurll, I guess Marty Scurll has it, but Noam Dar, Will Ospreay, Dave Mastiff, they've all had their shots at the Progress title, but were cheated out in some sort of way. Marty Scurll is there, who's just transitioned to the villain very recently, so he's red hot at this point. And then you got Jimmy Havoc and Paul Robinson, who represent the regression faction. Get it? Because it's progress, regression, it's opposite.
So disappointed we didn't get any "this is regress" chance.
Well, they don't like them, you see. So, and it used to be a faction of 4, but 2 of them were kicked out of the faction, which we'll touch on later, which might not have meant anything to you guys, but I'll explain when we get there.
I definitely did not get that at all. One thing I do want to mention before we get too deep into this, because we're talking about Will Ospreay.
Yes, good. I've got thoughts.
This is not physically the Will Ospreay that you know now, even the Will Ospreay that you know from 3 or 4 years ago when he was a top junior heavyweight. He had talked about before how up until a couple of years ago, he had never lifted a weight in his life. And seeing this, I believe the man. He facially he looks younger, but body wise, it's he looks like a smaller Eddie Dennis body wise.
Yeah,
it's absolutely nuts how much he has bulked up today. He's added so much muscle in present day that it's been a slow progression of him adding this muscle over the years that, like, going back to this 2015 here, it's jarring to see how thin he is in this match. Wow.
Well, and again, even compared to how he looked when he first came into New Japan, like you go back and watch those matches and you're like, man, he's put on so much size now compared to then. But then when you see, like, we just saw him, Jeremy and I just saw him live at a Warrior Wrestling show about a month and a half ago. And so you're seeing him on that show. Like, I think that was against Blake Christian and Trey Miguel. Yep. And he was so much bigger than those guys, even though they all wrestle a similar style. So then seeing him here so tiny was just, I was not fully prepared for that.
One other point I want to make about Ospreay before we get into the rest of the folks is Will Ospreay. You mentioned, Adam, that we saw him live. He is a wrestler that you have to see live. Some of the stuff that he does and the way he wrestles, it doesn't translate as well to television, because you're watching him on television. You're like, wow, this guy's he's incredible. One of the best wrestlers in the world in 2022. you see him live, it's a different level altogether, and it's a different experience. We first noticed it when Adam and I went to a Ring of Honor New Japan show at the Odeum in Villa Park. We saw Ospreay wrestle.
It was Flip Gordon
Flip
in 2018.
Gordon. Yeah, so we saw that match, and that was the first. We were sitting like second row for that, and we were like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, wow, like we really noticed the live Ospreay presentation as just special, and then you see it today even more so. Just if you get a chance to see him live, go out of your way to see a Will Ospreay in person.
Yeah,
awesome.
And just very quickly to that point, I almost can't think of anyone else in recent times where it's been that way, where he will be on a card with a lot of other very good wrestlers who are considered the top wrestlers or near top wrestlers in that same sort of fast-paced, high-flying, hard-hitting style. And then you see him out there with him, and you're like, my God, this guy is at a completely different level. Yes. It's something to see. I mean, like that Flip Gordon match, that was when Flip Gordon was getting all the buzz, all the hype. And then you saw him and it's like, yeah, he's pretty good, but my God, he's nowhere near this level.
Right. Yeah. And even back then in 2015, we're looking at this match. There's 6 people involved, but the spotlight is really on Jimmy Havoc and Will Ospreay. Yes. Those are the 2 guys that are the headline of this match, so to speak. And Ospreay, I mean, physically, obviously he's evolved, but it's just funny. You see him come out for his entrance. He's just such a white meat baby face.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
running up on each of the corners. Come on, gang. And now he's out. He just has such a presence to him nowadays.
He's Conor McGregor. He was not Conor McGregor back then. That's
a great way to put it.
But it is interesting in that we'll see, particularly towards the finish, a lot of the things that separate him from other guys that do the style. And I'm not just talking about athletically, but like intensity, facial expressions, all that is still there here in 2015.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But the match starts. We got 6 people in the ring. And it's pretty much it splits onto 4 versus 2 down the middle of the ring. So you got Jimmy Havoc, Paul Robinson versus everybody else. And the match starts with Paul Robinson hitting a double low blow onto Marty and Noam as Jimmy Havoc tries to do the same thing to Dave Mastiff, but Mastiff kind of blocks it. And then basically he chases Havoc around the ring. This is pretty much all hell breaks loose at the beginning of this match. Everybody's fighting on the outside. I don't even know if anybody's fighting in the ring. Everybody's more getting thrown into the rows of chairs.
Yeah,
more,
we're getting seven rows deep of chairs at this point.
Oh, yeah.
In the main event.
You got Marty Scurll. He has his umbrella. There's one spot where he just pokes Mastiff in the dick with it, which is fun. There's a point where Havoc he superplexes Will Ospreay to the outside onto everybody else, that classic indie kind of spot that you typically see, but it was fun.
And Havoc takes all of that onto the floor.
Yes.
Everybody else catches Ospreay, but Havoc just goes full back bump off the top rope to the floor.
They know where the money is.
Yeah, exactly. That looked pretty rough. I did also like, by the way, one of the few times where our announcer gives us a little bit of backstory that Robinson and Will Ospreay used to be a team, and I love this tag team name, the Swords of Essex. That is an awesome name.
Yeah, they were. I've only seen a little bit of them because Paul Robinson would eventually turn on Ospreay in one of the first chapters. But Paul Robinson's another guy. He started out in the first couple chapters. He was another just baby face. Everybody loved him. He was playing to the crowd. And then now he's just he's bald, this skinhead, this Dobby looking character.
He basically looks like Chris Daniels Cito would be the best way to describe him visually. I also isn't that that spin kick that Will Ospreay does with his opponent on the ground, isn't that named after Paul Robinson? Doesn't he call that the Robinson Special, or used to call it that? I was wondering if that's who that was named after.
I didn't know if it was him or Billy Robinson or somebody. That makes sense though. I never really thought about that. Ospreay's another guy. It's like every one of his moves has a name.
Yes.
But it drives me insane. But we get the first elimination here when Paul Robinson hits Dave Mastiff with a low blow, and then Noam Dar comes in with a running kick to the face and eliminates Mastiff.
This made me violently angry on my couch.
I know.
I desperately wanted this to come down to Mastiff and Osprey, and this was I kind of had the same reaction to this, Jeremy, that I had again on our December to Dismember show we did this season when CM Punk and Rob Van Dam were the first two men eliminated from the Extreme Elimination Chamber. I felt my hopes and dreams for this match diminishing greatly.
Well, Mastiff had just done an awesome release German suplex, sending Havoc into the buckles, and I'm like, here we go, and then he's eliminated.
It was well done though, especially with Dar kind of, picking up the pieces and getting it, like kind of feeling a little bit conflicted about taking the win, but he does, and then we'll see that'll play into what happens a few minutes later. Yeah.
Like you said, so Noam Dar, he eliminates Mastiff, but he's conflicted because they want to get the title off Havoc, and him eliminating Mastiff is a detriment to that. So as Noam is kind of conflicted, he's like, oh my God, what have I done? He gets kicked in the face by Jimmy Havoc and thus eliminated. I believe it was just like a super kick, right? By Jimmy Havoc? Or was there any other element to it?
I think that was it.
Yeah, now I did, Noam Dar did have, he has a move called the Champagne Super Knee Bar, which the Oasis tie-in is made me giggle. As
another great theme song.
That is it's a great theme song with the Oasis theme song, and then having a move called the Champagne Super Knee Bar.
Beautiful.
I was really struggling with whether I liked that or not. I decided I did. That was like teetering on the line of like ECW Joey Styles move names, or I'm like, you're trying a little too hard. But the fact that it was the Oasis reference made it okay.
Yes. Yeah.
No, it's fun. It's always fun. So now it's 2-on-2 somehow. So it's pretty much Jimmy Havoc and Paul Robinson versus Marty Scurll and Will Ospreay.
Which it's so weird to see Scurll and Ospreay kind of on the same side a little bit.
Well, even at this point, I mean, we're very early in their feud that they would have for years, but it's still pretty established at that point. So it's even in the context of 2015, it was weird to see.
Well, and with the idea that Ospreay can never beat Scurll even back then, and obviously that played through all the way into their New Japan feud.
Yeah, absolutely. But they team together a little bit. Marty Scurll hits a tornado DDT on the Jimmy Havoc, but keeps the head locked in, rolls right into a chicken wing. Havoc's able to fight out of it eventually. Paul Robinson gets back in. Marty Scurll just picks up Paul Robinson, which I believe Paul Robinson was announced at like 130 pounds, which sounds crazy to me. But
Scurll's able to press slam you.
Yes. That 130 pounds felt very accurate compared to some of the more worked weights that we had earlier on in the show. I believe that.
Yeah. So Scurll military presses Paul Robinson to the outside, lands on Jimmy Havoc. Ospreay tries to take advantage by giving a stomp to Scurll, but Scurll evades, and now these two start going at it. It's like, guys, let's just team together. Let's get the title of Jimmy Havoc, but everyone just is greedy for the title and wants to get eliminations, I guess. Ospreay and Marty Scurll have an exchange, which anybody who's ever seen a match between these two knows that they have amazing chemistry. The reversals, the counters between these guys, always fun to watch. Scurll locks in a chicken wing on Ospreay, but Ospreay is able to roll through into a roll-up, gets the 1-2-3 onto the Scurll, so Marty Scurll is now eliminated. So now it's a 2-1-1 handicap match, and Regression has the advantage. So it's like, how did we get here? So it's 3 people left. Havoc, Robinson, obviously, they gang up on Ospreay. There's one portion where they're beating down on Ospreay. Ospreay's on the ground. Paul Robinson drops the sickest loogie I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, God, that was horrible.
Worse than spit on Ospreay.
Worse than the hanger spot. Worse than the salt in the wounds. anything. Thank you. I would take light tubes, anything over that. Especially, I mean, even through 2015 eyes, 2022 eyes, just blow me up before you do that to me.
No, it was super gross. This is gross. This is a timeless grossness.
At no point is this not going to be gross. But at some point, Will fights back, knocks out Havoc. Paul Robinson prevents him from making the pin. So Paul Robinson knocks Will Ospreay to the outside. So now you have Havoc on the mat. You have Will Ospreay on the outside. Paul Robinson's conflicted whether he wants to do a tope on a Will Ospreay, or pin Jimmy Havoc, which is a fun little moment.
Yeah,
because
the crowd was great in this too, as far as like trying to get him to do what they want him to do. I will admit though, at this point, I was a little distracted by the fact that I had just seen Will Ospreay execute the zigzag.
Oh, yes. How could I forget? Just a way better version than Dolph Ziggler does, but we don't talk about that. But yeah, Paul takes this opportunity to try to pin Jimmy Havoc, his master, or the crowd. I think the crowd chanted Jimmy's little bitch.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that would make Jimmy, but so Paul Robinson pins Jimmy Havoc, but Havoc kicks out, which prompts a "You're in trouble" chant, which is fun.
I like
Havoc.
that.
And this is Havoc with the not thrilled with this just happened face. Very good. Again, good camera work here to get that.
Absolutely. But they shake hands, bygones be bygones. But Ospreay's able to recover. He drop kicks Paul Robinson into Havoc, knocking Havoc to the outside. And this allows Will Ospreay to hit the Essex Destroyer onto Paul Robinson.
The Essex Destroyer being a DDT version of a Canadian Destroyer.
Mm-hmm. Devastating looking. And that that eliminates Paul Robinson from the equation.
So what we've learned from this is that Canadian Destroyers cannot pin anyone unless it's like mid-2000s TNA and your Petey Williams, but the Essex Destroyer is a pinfall-worthy move.
Well, I think you have to be from where the move is called.
Very good point. Very good point.
I can see that.
Yeah, so that's the magic of it.
So how do we explain all those Death Valley driver finishes in wrestling through the years?
That's their second home. That's where they vacation, in Death Valley. So it's down to Will Ospreay and Jimmy Havoc, which was the main event of the last chapter. This is kind of the ongoing story between the two. And so it's down to these two. Paul Robinson on his way out attacks Will Ospreay, gives him a knee in the corner just to further be a dickhead, as if he needed to do anything else other than what he's already done. So another underlying story here. So Will Ospreay recently, I don't think he broke his neck, but he definitely injured himself doing the 630. And this was on they're called Endeavor shows, which are kind of like the minor leagues of Progress, kind of the NXT to Progress. But he was on one of those shows and he did the 630 and he landed high on his neck and injured himself. So the premise here is that Will Ospreay, now he's like gun shy to do it. Like now he doesn't want to do it. He's scared he's going to do that again. And that comes into play when Will has Jimmy down on the mat. Will goes to the top rope. He's prepping to do the 630, but he can't do it. He's hesitating. So instead, he just does a nice and easy spinning shooting star press onto Havoc. But Havoc gets the knees up because Will hesitated too long. Gets a 2 count.
This was a great near fall.
Yeah, this was my favorite spot.
Yes.
Yeah, the best thing on the entire show from an in-ring perspective, because you combined the modern high-flying craziness with a great, storyline point that clearly everybody in the audience was 100% on board with, knew what it was, and they were trying to will their guy, no pun intended, to work through his problems and get the win here.
Yeah, and then, like you said, the false finish here was great because he goes for the shooting star press. Jimmy gets the knees up, rolls up into a pin, 2 count. Jimmy then hits the acid rainmaker, which is his finisher, and gets a 2 count. It's at this point where Havoc, he grabs a mic because Ospreay is just down and out. He's been hit with so many moves. Havoc grabs the mic and he basically brings Jim Smallman, who's ringside. He brings him over. Havoc puts Will's teeth around the bottom rope so that Will is biting the bottom rope. Havoc talks into the mic. He's talking to Jim Smallman. He says, "This is what's going to happen to everybody that you put in my way." And then Jimmy Havoc proceeds to give Will a curb stomp onto the rope. Brutal looking. Follows it up with the acid rainmaker, a second one, and that gives Jimmy Havoc the win.
So is this his like first legitimate win as champion?
Trying to think. I mean, they've all been fairly legit. I mean, because like the last
this
chapter
was pretty decisive.
Yeah, I was surprised by how decisive this was. And again, I'm popping in and I'm not really sure, kind of where Will Ospreay in his progression. And obviously Jimmy Havoc is a much bigger deal here than he would be like on AEW Dark, but it still felt a little bit jarring.
It's because I'm with you. When I watched Jimmy Havoc on AEW, this is before I watched any progress. So to me, it's like you, it's just like kind of like a skinny Raven or a scrawny Nigel McGuinness that's not as good at wrestling kind of guy. Like that's kind of my impression of him. But when you watch all these in order, you see his story arc, you really get invested in Jimmy Havoc. You really believe in him that he's a champion.
Well, you could even tell that watching this show, like as the match went along, you had the video feature before and the match went along, like I could understand how this worked in this context much more than I did at the beginning of the show, where I'm like, what? Why is this guy a champion? I loved the curb stomp with the mouth over the rope spot. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Britt Baker steal this spot with Yuka Sakazaki on AEW? I'm almost positive that on an episode of Dynamite a few years ago that happened. So it's one of those that I'm shocked you don't see more, because it's such a brutally vicious thing, and it looks great, but it also is probably fairly safe to execute if you're not actually trying to kill the person.
Yeah, but at the same point, I'm kind of glad we don't see it all the time, because when it does happen, it looks vicious like it did here. So,
as well.
But yeah, that's the match. There's some hullabaloo after the match, but any other thoughts on the match itself?
Yeah, no, I mean, this was, this finish moves the story along. It sets up, kind of gets most of these guys now out of the way, like you mentioned, and now this clears the path for Flash Morgan Webster to get his opportunity.
Well, exactly. My take when I was watching this is, wow, Jimmy Havoc has cleared the deck. Who possibly is going to be able to take the title from him? And then Flash Morgan Webster's music hits, and we find out that's what's coming next.
Yeah. So the match concludes, and like you said, Flash Morgan Webster comes out, and as we mentioned, he's the Natural Progression Series winner, which essentially it's kind of like a Money in the Bank. You win a title shot whenever you want. And Flash comes out. He's like, I could go ahead and challenge you right now, but that would make me like you, which adds a sense of. Because logically, you're like, why wouldn't he just challenge him right now? But he has those morals behind it, so it all makes sense.
Well, it also showed how much the crowd is with him, because you could feel the crowd wanting to boo him for not taking the title shot now, but they loved him so much that they stopped themselves from doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And Flash, because he knows he has that Jimmy Havoc, he has Paul Robinson behind him. He has Isaac Zercher, who was the other henchman guy from the beginning. He knows that Havoc has these guys, so Flash has to have himself an insurance policy. And who is this insurance policy? Well, it's the London Riots that return here. Now, you guys might not, this probably didn't mean anything to you if you're coming into this cold, but basically, and I kind of alluded to it before, but when Jimmy Havoc initially turned heel, he turned heel by aligning with the London Riots. They attacked Jim Smallman. They attacked a couple other guys that were ringside. A vicious heel turn. So that was regression. It was Havoc, the London Riots, and Paul Robinson. So a few chapters ago, there was a 4-on-4 tag team match, and whoever lost the match, whoever got the pinfall, or I guess whoever took the fall, had to leave Progress forever. And one of the London Riots ended up losing that. And the way it happened, Jimmy Havoc basically threw them under the bus. Essentially, that's what the finish was. So they are not happy with Jimmy Havoc. And the whole story here is that Jim Smallman has agreed to bring the London Riots back because he knows that they have a vendetta against Havoc and Robinson, and they're going to do whatever they can to destroy Jimmy Havoc. And I believe even they cut a promo later, the London Riots do, that they're not here for titles. They're here to make sure that Jimmy Havoc dies. So that's a little extreme, but it's kind of par for the course for what we've seen so far. So the London Riots return. They attack Robinson and Havoc, and send the crowd home happy, I suppose. So is that adding any context to what you saw?
Yeah, definitely.
Makes a lot more sense.
I was not familiar with either of those guys or kind of what the significance was, but you could tell from the crowd reaction, it was clearly significant to them.
Yeah, because they were such hardcore heels before, and now they're like so beloved. So it's kind of just like equal in the opposite direction. So in the next chapter, the headline match is the London Riots versus Havoc and Robinson. So that sets that up, and that brings the show to a close. So yeah, folks, Progress Wrestling Chapter 18. And any other overall thoughts on the show that we didn't touch on?
No, I mean the there was the guys who were the stars of this show were they delivered. It was great to see them. I never have to see Bubblegum again, and but no, otherwise this is a fun ending. It's one of those, watching the crowd get back into it at the end and get invested in this. When you looked around and you saw how many people had on some sort of Jimmy Havoc gear, these people were invested in this storyline, so they've been watching it over the chapters, like you mentioned, and there's a lot of people that cared, and for a lot of this show, there was there was a lot of entertaining themselves, but in the main event, it was what they were here for, and it delivered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point too, like we talked about earlier, that I would imagine, and Kyle, you would know this better than either me or Jeremy would, but I would imagine this probably felt a little bit different from your normal big Progress show, because we had all those stars in the main event. And so the stuff you had prior, there wasn't necessarily, outside of, the street fight, there wasn't necessarily a lot of strong emotional investment. So maybe some of the things that we talked about with the British crowds, those came to the forefront a little bit more in those matches where when we got in the main event and people were, everybody there had strong emotions, strong feelings on Jimmy Havoc. It was either they were in his corner or they wanted him to die, as their shirt said. And that led to, great reactions throughout. And I mean, it's a fun show. I mean, like Jeremy said, the guys that I expected to delivered. I wouldn't say that there was anybody that I came into it really not knowing a ton about that I was completely blown away by. I would say the closest to that was probably Rampage Brown. I was really impressed by, but outside of that, it was the guys that were stars showed themselves to be stars, and the guys that weren't were mostly okay, but weren't really, much to write home about.
Yeah, nothing was really offensively bad, in my opinion. It's definitely one of the weaker shows, just because, like you said, it was so top heavy with the main event. But the no DQ match, the tag match with Tommy End, this show definitely has some.
Yeah.
What match? I don't
Not
even
the
know.
tag match. Okay.
That would be the only truly, I would say, close to offensively bad thing on it. But
No, you're right. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's pretty much the point I was making. But Progress, I mean, they're especially in this era, because from what I've heard, they kind of get to a point where, they lose their storyline elements to their shows, which I guess I'll get there eventually. But the early days of Progress are consistently great watches. So I don't know if these guys are included in your randomizer or not. But.
No, so this usually our shows have to be at least 10 years. So this is the most modern thing we've ever reviewed. Okay. So this is I believe it starts in
2012. I think Chapter 1 is in 2012. So I think you're almost there. I think you're almost to the day, I think. So
we'll be able to throw those in the in the randomizer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But we talked about it, the randomizer, wrestling at random. First of all, thank you guys for making the time to watch the show, come on to talk about it. Where can everybody find Wrestling at Random, follow you guys, and listen to you guys?
Sure. The best way to interact with us is via our Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. You can also do that at Instagram as well. And we have a podcast that comes out every single Sunday. You can subscribe anywhere podcasts are found. We're at every single place. WrestlingAtRandom.com is the website that has the links to everything in the back catalog and all of the links to our social media as well. It is an evergreen podcast. So if you're hearing this now and you want to hear us review some shows, you can look through the entire back catalog, and it's as new as the week it came out. So you can go drop in, listen to it, because it's literally at random. We fire up the randomizer, it tells us what to watch, we watch it, we review it every single week. So go out and take a look at everything in the back catalog. This week that we're recording this, we released our episode reviewing WWF Primetime Wrestling from 1990, one of just a super fun show. So you can start at the most recent, work your way back. You can go pick and choose along the way. It's all there for you. WrestlingAtRandom.com.
And you can also, we should mention, we don't talk about it often. It's kind of a thing that makes us laugh quite a bit. You can also find the show on YouTube, where we have
the audio.
We have quite the active listener base there, even though we never mention it. We don't tell people interact with the show on YouTube, and yet people do. So yeah,
we
you
love
can
it
check
though.
out.
We love it. We see your YouTubers out there. We love it.
Oh yeah,
I'm terrible at that too. Yeah, I always forget. Yeah, like, sub, ring the bell, touch my ass. Like, what? I don't know what you do on YouTube, you know. But yeah, once again, thank you guys. Yeah, everybody, check out Wrestling at Random. And yeah, once again, thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us. It was a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Once again, thank you to Jeremy and Adam from the Wrestling at Random podcast. Awesome time with those guys. Check out their podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as YouTube. Follow them on Twitter at WrestleAtRandom, and all their info in the description. Check them out. Good blokes. And check me out, why don't you? At apronbump.com. You can find all my full episodes there. You can go to the episodes tab and kind of tailor whatever you like listening to. If you want to listen to more Progress or like TNA, Ring of Honor, New Generation, Attitude Era, whatever tickles your pickle, go to the episodes tab at apronbump.com and it'll bring you to all of those episodes. And, Twitter, Apron Bump on Twitter, or Apron_bump on Instagram, probably. I don't actually know. All of that in the description as well. Oh, what a time. It's funny. This is like one of the least significant Progress chapters that I've watched, but it's the longest. As I let this motorcycle drive by. Vroom, 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 vroom. Look how loud my motorcycle is. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Dildo. But anyways, speaking of dildos, I don't know. I've said it before. Sometimes I just fuck around in the outro to see how many people listen to it. Because I don't listen to a lot of outros in my podcast. I get halfway through it. I'm like, enough of these assholes. I'm just kidding. Well, for the most part. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. If I could give all of you forehead kisses, I would. I don't always have pants on when I do these. So when I don't, I feel it, Thank you guys so much for listening. I'm hard.
It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started. It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it.